The sniper had been picking off the rescue team for 6 hours. 3 wounded, 2 dead, and nobody could get a visual on the shooter's position. Captain Morrison studied the map one more time, knowing they were running out of options in daylight. Then Lieutenant Chun said something that made everyone in the TOC freeze. "Sir, I know who that is." The way she said it, quiet and certain, told Morrison this was about to get complicated. "And how exactly do you know that, Lieutenant?" She met his eyes. "Because that's my call sign they keep using on a radio." The Tactical Operations Center had gone completely silent. 8 officers and NCOs stared at the slight woman standing beside the communications desk. Lieutenant Sarah Chun was intelligence, not combat arms. She spent her days analyzing reports and updating maps, not identifying snipers who had killed 5 coalition soldiers in the past 2 days. Morrison watched her face, looking for any sign of uncertainty. He found none. "Explain," he said. Chun stepped closer to the map table, her finger tracing the pattern of attacks. "The first hit was here, at 0600. Convoy returning from patrol. The round came from 1100 meters, wind from the northwest at 8 knots. The spotter called it before the shot. Clean kill, driver never had a chance. Second attack here, 0930. Medevac landing zone. The pilot took a round through the canopy at 900 meters. Again, the call came first on the radio. Third attack, this location. 1400 hours. Resuppli detail. 1300 meters, thermal crosswind." The shot announcement preceded impact by 2 seconds. Morrison had read the same reports. What he had not read was why any of this mattered to a junior intelligence officer. "Your point, Lieutenant? Those are not just precise shots, sir. Those are signature shots. The call before impact, the specific ranges, the wind reading methodology." Chun paused, and Morrison saw something flicker across her face. Pain, maybe, or recognition of something she wished she could forget. "That's Sierra Whiskey 7 protocol. Advanced reconnaissance and surveillance techniques taught at exactly one place." The Army Sniper School at Fort Benning had graduated thousands of snipers over the decades. Morrison kept his voice neutral. "Lots of people go through that program. Not this program," Chun said. "Sierra Whiskey 7 is not standard sniper school. It's a specialized counter-surveillance course. 6-month duration. Invitation only. They teach specific protocols for deep reconnaissance in denied territory. The pre-shot radio call is a spotter verification technique. Ensures both shooter and spotter confirm target, range, environmental factors. Prevents friendly fire in complex environments." Morrison glanced at Major Kendrick, his XO, who had been listening with increasing skepticism. Kendrick was old infantry, 20 years in, and he had never hidden his disdain for desk officers who thought they understood combat. The Major crossed his arms. "And you know this how, exactly?" Chun turned to face him directly. "Because I graduated from that program 4 years ago, sir. Class of 2018. There were 12 of us. We each had unique call signs based on our designation sequence. Mine was Phantom 7. The radio operator, Specialist Torres, suddenly sat up straighter. "Sir, that's what we've been hearing. Every time before a shot, someone transmits Phantom 7, target acquired. We thought it was just tactical chatter, maybe insurgent code." "It's not code," Chun said. "It's deliberate. Whoever is out there is using my call sign. They want us to know." Kendrick made a dismissive sound. "So some insurgent got hold of old radio intercepts and is playing mind games. Does not help us locate or neutralize the threat." Morrison studied Chun more carefully. She had been at the FOB for 11 months, always professional, always competent, but she kept to herself. Her efficiency reports were excellent, but contained nothing about sniper training. "Lieutenant, your file lists you as intelligence analysis, signals interpretation. No mention of sniper qualification." "That's correct, sir. I requested the transfer after my second deployment. The sniper program was not the right fit for me." Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've witnessed extraordinary courage in your community. Morrison saw the deflection for what it was, but he also saw opportunity. If Chun understood these protocols, she might be able to predict the shooter's next move. What else can you tell me about Sierra Whiskey 7 methodology? Chen returned her attention to the map. The program emphasizes patience and position sustainability. A Sierra Whiskey operator will establish a hide that can be maintained for days. They pre-select multiple firing positions within a given area, usually 3 to 5 locations. After each shot, they displace to a secondary position. Never random. Always pre-planned routes with overlapping fields of fire. So he's mobile, Kendrick said. That we already knew. Not just mobile, Chen corrected. Methodical. Look at the attack pattern. She pointed to each location in sequence. These are not targets of opportunity. Each one degrades our operational capability. First, ground transportation. Second, air medevac. Third, resupply. He is systematically isolating this FOB. Morrison felt the temperature in the room drop. Chen was right. The attacks had seemed random, but viewed through this lens, they formed a coherent strategy. Who was in your class, Lieutenant? Who else graduated Sierra Whiskey 7 in 2018? Chen's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. 11 others, sir, but only one who would have the skill level for this. Only one who was my partner for the entire 6 months. Name: Sergeant Marcus Webb. Chen's voice had gone flat, professional, as if reciting from a casualty report she had read too many times. He was my spotter. We deployed together twice. Afghanistan, first tour. Yemen, second tour. He was listed as killed in action 18 months ago. Ambush outside Kandahar. His body was never recovered. Kendrick shook his head. So you think a dead man is shooting at us? I think someone with Marcus Webb's training is shooting at us, Chen said. And they're using my call sign because they want me to know they are here. Morrison made his decision. Lieutenant Chen, you are now attached to this tactical problem. I want everything you can give me about this shooter's probable patterns, likely positions, and potential next targets. Major Kendrick, coordinate with base security. I want every available asset focused on counter-sniper operations. Sir, Kendrick began. With respect, Lieutenant Chen is an intelligence analyst, not a tactical operator. We have trained snipers on this base who should be leading this effort. Your objection is noted, Morrison said. But right now, Lieutenant Chen knows more about how this shooter thinks than anyone else in this TOC. She stays on this. Chen, you have 4 hours. I want options on my desk before dark. The meeting broke up quickly after that. Chen remained at the map table, studying the terrain with an intensity that made Morrison pause. He walked over to stand beside her. Lieutenant, off the record, what are the chances your former partner is still alive? Chen did not look up from the map. 6 months ago, sir, I would have said 0. Marcus Webb was one of the best I ever worked with, but nobody survives an RPG ambush at close range without remains. But now, hearing that call sign, seeing these patterns, her finger traced an arc across the map. If he's alive, if he's somehow made it out, then we have a serious problem. Because Marcus does not miss. And he does not stop until the mission is complete. What mission? That, Chen said quietly, is what I need to figure out. Because right now, it looks like the mission is me. Morrison left her there, surrounded by maps and reports, hunting ghosts in the Hindu Kush. Outside the TOC, the sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains. Somewhere in those peaks, a sniper was watching, waiting, using a call sign that belonged to the woman now searching for him. Morrison had been in enough firefights to recognize a personal war when he saw one. Whatever was happening here, it went deeper than tactics and training. It went to the bone. Chen spent the next 3 hours building a profile she hoped would never prove accurate. If Marcus Webb had somehow survived that ambush, if he had been the one behind the scope for the past 2 days, then everything she thought she knew about him was wrong. The Marcus she remembered would never turn his skills against American forces. But the evidence kept stacking up in ways that made her chest tight. She pulled up the classified after-action report from the Kandahar ambush. March 15th, 18 months ago. Webb's team had been conducting surveillance on a suspected weapons cache when they were hit by coordinated fire from 3 directions. The team leader, Staff Sergeant Okoye, had died instantly. 2 others were wounded but extracted. Webb had provided covering fire, allowing the survivors to reach the extraction point. Then the radio went dead. When the quick reaction force arrived 20 minutes later, they found blood, shell casings, and scorched earth from an RPG impact. No Boethius. The official determination was killed in action. Remains unrecoverable. Chen had read that report so many times she had it memorized. What she had never noticed before, what she had been too grief-stricken to see, was the gap. 20 minutes between last radio contact and QRF arrival. 20 minutes was a lifetime in combat. Long enough to bleed out. Long enough to be captured. Long enough to disappear. She pulled up satellite imagery of the ambush site, overlaying it with current topographical data. The location was 40 kilometers from their current position, accessible through mountain passes that insurgent groups used regularly. If someone had wanted to move a prisoner or a collaborator, this was the route they would take. Lieutenant Shun. She turned to find Staff Sergeant Rodriguez standing in the doorway. He was the senior sniper on base, a quiet professional with 2 deployment ribbons and a reputation for never missing. He had also been one of the people in the TOC earlier, listening to her explanation with an expression she could not quite read. "Staff Sergeant," she said, "what can I do for you?" Rodriguez stepped into the small office she had commandeered. "I heard what you said about Sierra Whiskey 7. About the protocols." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I went through standard sniper school at Benning. Did my time, learned the craft. But I never heard your program." "Most people haven't," Chen said. "It is not advertised. The Army pulls candidates from active snipers who show aptitude for extended reconnaissance. 6 months of additional training focused on deep penetration operations, counter-surveillance, and autonomous decision-making in denied territory. Autonomous meaning no oversight." Chen nodded. "Meaning you and your spotter are completely on your own for weeks at a time. No radio contact, no support, no extraction if things go wrong. You learn to think like the enemy, move like the enemy, survive like the enemy. The washout rate is 60%. Rodriguez absorbed this. And you made it through. Barely." Chen turned back to her computer screen, not wanting to see whatever judgment might be in his eyes. "I was good at the technical aspects. Ballistics, environmental calculation, fieldcraft. But the psychological component, the isolation, the weight of taking a life from 1,000 meters away." She stopped, realizing she was saying more than she intended. "I transferred out after my second deployment. Because of Webb." Chen's hands stilled on the keyboard. "What makes you say that?" Rodriguez moved closer, lowering his voice. "Because I've been doing this long enough to recognize the look. Whatever happened between you two, it was not just professional. And whatever is happening now, it is personal. Am I wrong?" She met his eyes. "No," she said quietly. "You're not wrong." The silence stretched between them, filled with understanding. Finally, Rodriguez spoke again. "Captain Morrison sent me to assist you. He figured you might need someone who understands the tactical side. Someone who can translate your analysis into operational planning." Chun felt something loosen in her chest. Kendrick had made it clear he considered her a liability, but Morrison was giving her actual support. "Thank you, Staff Sergeant. I could use the help." Rodriguez pulled up a chair. "Show me what you have." For the next hour, Chun walked him through her analysis. The attack patterns formed a 3-point triangle with the FOB at the center. Each shooting position offered clear lines of sight to critical infrastructure while maintaining escape routes through terrain that made pursuit nearly impossible. The shooter was not just skilled. He was intimately familiar with this specific area. "How long would it take to learn this terrain that well?" Rodriguez asked. "Weeks minimum," Chen said. "More likely months. You would need to scout every position, chart every route, identify every dead space and danger area. This is not opportunistic. This is deliberate, long-term planning." Rodriguez studied the map. "So if this is Webb, he has been here for a while. Preparing." Chen nodded. "And if he went to this much trouble, he has a specific objective. The question is what?" Her radio crackled. "Lieutenant Chun, report to the TOC immediately." Chun and Rodriguez exchanged glances before heading outside. The sun had set, leaving the base bathed in the harsh glow of security lighting. They crossed the compound quickly, boots crunching on gravel. Inside the TOC, Morrison stood with Kendrick and two other officers Chun recognized as the base intelligence and operations chiefs. "Lieutenant," Morrison said without preamble, "we just received a transmission on the emergency frequency. Someone is asking to speak with Phantom 7 specifically. They say they have information about the sniper attacks." Chun felt her pulse spike. Did they identify themselves? Negative, but they used proper radio protocol and authentication codes that are 3 months current. Whoever they are, they have access to our communication security. It could be a trap, Kendrick said. Lure us into revealing information or positions. Or it could be someone trying to help, the intelligence chief countered. Either way, we need to respond. Morrison turned to Chun. "Lieutenant, this is your call. You are the only Phantom 7. If you want to take this contact, I will authorize it. But understand the risk. You will be confirming your identity to whoever is out there." Chun thought about Marcus, about the call sign he had helped her earn, about the partnership they had built over months of training and deployment. If he was alive, if he was reaching out, she needed to know. And if it was someone else using his methods, she needed to understand why. "I'll take the contact," she said. Morrison nodded to the radio operator. "Put her through." Torres handed Chun the handset. She took a breath, steadying herself, then pressed the transmit button. "This is Phantom 7. Identify yourself." Static filled the speakers for 3 long seconds. Then a voice came through, male, measured, with an accent that spoke of too many years and too many countries. "Hello, Sarah. It has been a long time." Chen's world tilted. She knew that voice, had heard it in her earpiece during 100 operations, calling winds and ranges, confirming targets, keeping her alive. "Marcus," she said, barely managing to keep her voice level. "You're supposed to be dead." "Death is negotiable," he replied, "especially when you have skills people want. But I did not call to discuss philosophy. I called because you need to understand what is happening here." "Then tell me," Chun said. "Tell me why you are killing American soldiers." Another pause. When Webb spoke again, his voice had gone cold. "I am not killing Americans, Sarah. I am protecting assets." "There's a difference." "Assets," Chun repeated. "What assets?" "That is what I need to show you. But it has to be face to face. Just you. No backup, no tracking, no games. Tomorrow at 0600, there's an abandoned compound 3 clicks northwest of your position. Grid coordinate November Victor 473298. Come alone, and I will explain everything. Bring company, and people die. Your choice." The transmission ended with a click of finality. Chun stood holding the dead handset, aware that everyone in the TOC was staring at her. Morrison spoke first. "Thoughts?" "It is definitely Webb," Chun said. "Voice match is positive, and the compound he mentioned is real. I can see it on the SAT imagery. Perfect terrain for an ambush. So we do not go," Kendrick said. "Simple." Chun shook her head slowly. "If we do not go, he continues the attacks. He has already demonstrated he can hit us at will. And now we know he has been here for months, preparing." She looked at Morrison. "Sir, I think he is telling the truth about wanting to talk. Marcus was always direct. If you wanted me dead, I would already be dead. You cannot seriously be considering this," Kendrick said. "It violates every protocol we have." Morrison held up a hand. "Let her finish." Chun gathered her thoughts. "We have 3 options. Option 1, ignore the contact and continue counter-sniper operations blind. Option 2, treat it as a trap and send a tactical team to the compound. Option 3, I go and we get intelligence directly from the source. Option 3 gets you killed," Kendrick said flatly. "Maybe," Chun acknowledged, "but it also might end this without more casualties. And if Marcus is telling the truth about protecting assets, we need to know what he means. This could be bigger than just a rogue sniper." Rodriguez, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "I could provide overwatch. Set up 1,000 meters out. If things go bad, at least someone would have eyes on." Morrison considered this. "Lieutenant Chun, you understand what you are volunteering for." "Yes, sir," Chun said. "But I also understand Marcus Webb better than anyone else in this room. I know how he thinks, how he operates. If anyone can get him to talk, it is me." The captain studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to his operations chief. "Draw up a tactical plan. Overwatch positions, quick reaction force, medevac on standby. If Lieutenant Chun is going to do this, we do it right. He looked back at Chun. You have until 0600 to prepare. I suggest you use the time wisely. The meeting dissolved, officers moving to their stations to begin planning. Chun remained by the radio, staring at the grid coordinates Webb had given her. Rodriguez appeared at her elbow. You really think you can trust him? Chun considered the question honestly. 2 days ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. Now, I do not know, but I do know that Marcus never does anything without a reason. Whatever is happening, whatever turned him, there's a purpose behind it. I need to understand that purpose. And if understanding means walking into a kill zone, then at least I will die knowing the truth, Chun said. That has to count for something. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Get some rest, Lieutenant. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. Chun left the TOC and walked across the dark compound to her quarters. Above her, stars blazed in the clear Afghan sky, the same stars Marcus had taught her to navigate by during their training. She wondered if he was looking at those same stars now, somewhere in the mountains, planning whatever came next. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it just made her sad. Whatever Marcus had become, whatever he was doing, the man she had known was still in there somewhere. She had to believe that, because if she was wrong, if the Marcus Webb she remembered was truly gone, then tomorrow morning she would be walking into her own grave. Chun did not sleep. She spent the hours before dawn reviewing everything she knew about Marcus Webb, looking for the crack that might explain his transformation. The Marcus she remembered had been relentlessly principled, the kind of soldier who turned down lucrative contractor offers because he believed in the mission. He had grown up in Detroit, raised by a grandmother after his parents died in a car accident. The Army had given him purpose, structure, family. Turning against that family made no sense unless something fundamental had broken. At 0400, she gave up on rest and began her preparation. The meeting was 2 hours away. She dressed in full combat gear, checked her sidearm 3 times, and stared at the rifle Rodriguez had left for her. An M4 carbine, standard issue, nothing like the custom precision weapon she had qualified on during Sierra Whiskey 7. Her hands remembered the weight of those rifles, the way they became extensions of her body. She had not touched a sniper weapon since her last deployment with Marcus. Rodriguez found her in the armory at 0500. It looked like he had not slept either. I have the Overwatch position scouted. Ridgeline 800 meters northeast of the compound. Clear sight lines, good concealment. If Webb tries anything, I will have the shot. Chun nodded her thanks. Just remember, if shooting starts, Marcus is not your average target. He will know you are there. He will have planned for it, which is why I will be in the last place he expects, Rodriguez said. He handed her a small device. Covert transmitter. Audio only. I will be able to hear everything. If you need help, use the phrase gray skies. That is our signal for immediate extraction. Chun pocketed the transmitter. What if he searches me? Rodriguez gave her a grim smile. Then we hope he still cares enough about you not to shoot first. He paused. Lieutenant, one more thing. Major Kendrick tried to convince Morrison to scrub the mission. Called it reckless, unnecessary risk. Morrison shut him down, but Kendrick is not happy. Watch your back when you get to that compound, but also watch it when you get back. Wonderful, Chun muttered. One enemy in the mountains, one on the base. Welcome to the infantry, Rodriguez said. It is always complicated. They moved out at 0530, a small convoy rolling through the FOB gates into the pre-dawn darkness. Chun rode in the lead vehicle with Rodriguez and a fire team from 2nd Platoon. Behind them came the quick reaction force, ready to respond if things deteriorated. The plan was simple. Chun would approach the compound on foot from the south. Rodriguez would be in position before she arrived, invisible and lethal. The QRF would stage 2 clicks back, close enough to respond, but far enough not to spook Webb. The convoy stopped at the designated drop point. Chun stepped out into the cold mountain air, her breath forming clouds in the darkness. Rodriguez gripped her shoulder briefly. Good luck, Lieutenant. Try not to get shot. I will do my best, Chun said. She checked her watch. 0550. 10 minutes to reach the compound. She started walking, her boots finding purchase on the rocky terrain, her eyes adjusting to the ambient light. The compound materialized gradually from the gloom, a cluster of mud brick structures that had been abandoned years ago when the village relocated closer to the main highway. Perfect location for a clandestine meeting. Isolated, defensible, and far enough from prying eyes. Chen approached cautiously, scanning for tripwires, pressure plates, any sign of explosive surprises. Marcus had been trained in demolitions like all Sierra whiskey operators. But she found nothing. The compound's entrance stood open, dark and uninviting. She keyed her transmitter twice, the signal that she was going in. The interior courtyard was empty except for debris and weather damage. Dawn was beginning to break over the eastern peaks, casting long shadows across the crumbling walls. Chun moved to the center of the space, positioning herself where she had clear sight lines to all exits. Then she waited. Marcus Webb appeared so quietly she almost missed it. One moment the doorway to her left was empty. The next he was standing there, rifle held low but ready. He looked different, thinner, harder, with a beard that changed the shape of his face. His eyes were the same though, sharp, calculating, missing nothing. "Hello, Sarah," he said. His voice was calm, conversational, as if they were meeting for coffee instead of in an abandoned compound with weapons between them. "You came alone like I asked. I appreciate that." Chun kept her hands visible, away from her sidearm. "Your appreciation means so much, Marcus, especially coming from someone who is supposed to be dead." Webb moved into the courtyard, circling slowly to maintain distance. Death was preferable to what they had planned for me. Turns out being dead has advantages. People stop looking for you. "Who are they?" Chen asked. "Who wanted you dead badly enough to fake an ambush?" Webb's expression darkened. "The same people who sent us into that valley, knowing it was compromised. The same people who decided my team was acceptable collateral damage for their operation." He stopped moving, his eyes locked on hers. "Tell me, Sarah, when you read the after-action report, did anything strike you as odd?" Chen had spent enough hours reviewing that report to recite it. "Everything struck me as odd, Marcus, starting with why your team was sent to that location with minimal support." "Exactly," Webb said. "We were bait. A reconnaissance element deliberately exposed to draw out insurgent forces. Except the intelligence was wrong. Or more accurately, it was fabricated. There was no weapons cache. There was no high-value target. There was just my team walking into a kill zone because someone needed bodies to justify their budget." Chun felt cold spreading through her chest. "You're saying command set you up. I am saying someone in the intelligence chain manufactured a target, sent us to verify it, and made sure the enemy knew we were coming." Webb's voice had gone hard. "Okoye died believing he was serving his country. The others were wounded fighting for a mission that never existed. And I was left bleeding in a ditch, listening to the QRF get delayed by convenient vehicle malfunctions." "How did you survive?" Chen asked. "Local contacts," Webb said. "People I had worked with on previous operations. They pulled me out, patched me up, hit me while I healed. When I was strong enough to think clearly, I started investigating, tracking communications, following money, connecting pieces. What I found was worse than I imagined." "Which is what?" Chun pressed. "What did you find that turned you into whatever you are now?" Webb reached into his vest and pulled out a small data drive. "Everything is here. Names, dates, transactions. Proof that someone has been running unauthorized operations in this region for the past 3 years. Using American resources, American intelligence, American lives to build their own private network. Drugs, weapons, influence. All under the cover of counterterrorism. And the people you have been shooting," Chun said. "How do they fit into this?" Webb's jaw tightened. "I have not killed anyone who was not part of the network. Every target I have engaged was dirty. The convoy driver was running opium. The medevac pilot was transporting cash. The resupply team was moving weapons to militia groups that are supposed to be our enemies." Chun stared at him. "That is insane, Marcus. You're telling me there is a criminal enterprise operating inside our own forces?" "I'm telling you I have proof," Webb said. And I'm telling you that the people running it will kill to protect it. They already tried to kill me once. They will try again if they know I'm alive. He held out the data drive. This is why I called you, Sarah. Because you're the only person I trust to do something about it. Take this to someone clean. Someone outside the chain of command here. Expose these bastards before more soldiers die for their profit. Chun looked at the drive, then back at Webb. If this is true, if you have real evidence, why not come in yourself? Let proper authorities handle it. Because proper authorities got my team killed, Webb said flatly. Because the network reaches higher than you think. Because if I walk into that FOB, I will be dead within 24 hours and this drive will disappear. He took a step closer. But you can do it. You can get this out. You can make sure Okoye and the others did not die for nothing. Chen's mind raced through possibilities, implications, risks. If Webb was telling the truth, this was massive. If he was lying or delusional, she was being manipulated into compromising herself and the mission. How do I know any of this is real? Marcus? How do I know you have not been turned? That you are not feeding me disinformation? Webb smiled sadly. You do not. You have to decide whether you trust me. The same way I'm trusting you right now not to have a sniper team already lined up to take me out. Chun felt the weight of the transmitter in her pocket. Rodriguez was listening to every word, probably had Webb in his crosshairs already. One word from her, and this ended. But if Webb was telling the truth, that ending would bury evidence of corruption that had cost lives and would cost more. I need time to verify this, she said carefully. Time to look at what you are claiming. You have 48 hours, Webb said. After that, I disappear. And if you decide to hunt me instead of the real enemy, then we become adversaries. I do not want that, Sarah. I never wanted any of this. But I will not let good soldiers keep dying while corrupt officers profit. He placed the data drive on a piece of broken concrete between them, then stepped back. I'm leaving now. Do not try to follow. Do not try to track me. Just take the drive, verify the contents, and do the right thing. That is all I'm asking. Chun moved forward slowly and picked up the drive. It was surprisingly light for something that might contain evidence of treason. When she looked up, Webb had already melted back into the shadows of the compound. She heard his voice one more time, distant and fading. I'm sorry it came to this. I'm sorry I could not tell you the truth before. But I'm not sorry for trying to stop them. Someone has to. Then he was gone, vanishing into the network of buildings and terrain he had spent months learning. Chun stood alone in the courtyard, clutching the data drive, aware that Rodriguez was probably screaming in her earpiece to give the signal for pursuit. But she did not give it. Instead, she keyed her transmitter and said, I am coming out. Mission complete. No contact required. She walked back to the extraction point, her mind churning through everything Webb had told her. Either she was holding evidence of a major conspiracy, or she was holding the delusions of a traumatized soldier who had convinced himself betrayal explained his survival. The only way to know was to look at the data, and that meant making a choice about who to trust in a world where trust had just become a deadly commodity. Rodriguez was waiting at the extraction point with fire in his eyes. What the hell was that, Lieutenant? You had him right there. I had the shot. Clean, no wind, perfect angle. One word from you, and this whole thing ends. Chun climbed into the vehicle, exhaustion suddenly crashing over her. It is not that simple, Staff Sergeant. Webb gave me intelligence that needs verification before we make any moves. Intelligence, Rodriguez repeated, his voice tight with frustration. He killed 5 of our people. He is a rogue operator working with insurgents. What intelligence could possibly justify letting him walk? Chun pulled the data drive from her pocket. This, evidence of criminal activity inside our own command structure. If it is real, if even half of what he claims is true, then the people we should be hunting are not in those mountains. They're on this base. The vehicle started moving back toward the FOB, bouncing over the rough terrain. Rodriguez stared at the drive like it might detonate. And if it is not real, if Webb is playing you, then we find him and end this, Chun said. But I need to look at what he gave me first. I need to know what we are dealing with. Morrison is not going to like this, Rodriguez said. He authorized a contact, not a prisoner exchange. You were supposed to gather intelligence and facilitate capture. I gathered intelligence, Chen said. Whether it leads to capture or something bigger, we will know soon enough. They rode in tense silence for the rest of the trip. When they arrived back at the FOB, Major Kendrick was waiting outside the TOC with 2 MPs. Chun felt her stomach drop. This was going to get complicated fast. Lieutenant Chun, Kendrick said as she stepped out of the vehicle. Captain Morrison wants to see you immediately, and I will need that data storage device you are carrying. Chen's hand instinctively moved to her pocket. This is operational intelligence, sir. It needs to be reviewed and classified before general distribution. Kendrick's expression hardened. That was not a request, Lieutenant. Any materials obtained during an authorized operation fall under my purview as XO. Hand it over. Chen looked past him to the TOC entrance. Is Captain Morrison inside? He is in a classified briefing, Kendrick said, which is why I'm handling this. The drive, Lieutenant. Now, something in Kendrick's tone set off alarms in Chen's head. Webb's warning echoed in her mind. The network reaches higher than you think. She made a split-second decision. With respect, sir, I will deliver this directly to Captain Morrison as per his operational authority. You are welcome to be present during the debriefing. Kendrick took a step closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. You are walking a very thin line, Chun. I have been patient with your unconventional methods, but insubordination will not be tolerated. Rodriguez moved to Chen's side, his presence a subtle backup. Major, the lieutenant is following proper intelligence handling protocols. Chain of custody matters for evidentiary purposes. Stay out of this, Staff Sergeant, Kendrick snapped. This does not concern you. Actually, sir, Rodriguez said calmly. I was the overwatch for the operation. Any intelligence gathered falls under joint custody until proper debrief. That is standard operating procedure. Kendrick looked between them, clearly calculating his next move. Finally, he stepped back. Fine, but this conversation is not over. Captain Morrison will hear about this obstruction. He stalked away, the MPs following. Chun released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Thank you, she said to Rodriguez. Do not thank me yet, Rodriguez replied, because now we have 2 problems, Webb in the mountains and Kendrick on base. And I'm starting to wonder which one is more dangerous. They entered the TOC to find Morrison concluding his briefing with the intelligence and operations chiefs. He looked up as Chun approached, his expression unreadable. Lieutenant, report. Chun gave him a concise summary of the meeting, leaving out nothing. Webb's claims about being set up, the alleged criminal network, the evidence on the drive. Morrison listened without interrupting, his face growing progressively grimmer. When she finished, he held out his hand. Let me see it. Chen gave him the drive. Morrison turned it over in his fingers, studying it like it might contain a bomb instead of data. If what Webb claims is true, this is beyond my authority to investigate. This goes to CID, maybe even DOD Inspector General, which could take weeks, Chen said. And if the network is as extensive as Webb claims, they will have time to cover their tracks or eliminate Webb before he can testify. If Webb is even telling the truth, Morrison said, this could be an elaborate psychological operation designed to sow distrust and compromise our operations. Yes, sir, Chen acknowledged, which is why I need to verify the contents before we make any decisions about how to proceed. Morrison considered this. You understand that looking at this data makes you part of whatever comes next. If it is real, you become a witness. If it is fake, you become complicit in Webb's games. I understand, sir, but I knew Marcus Webb for 2 years. Worked with him, trusted him with my life. If there is even a chance he is telling the truth, we have to investigate. Morrison made his decision. You have 12 hours. I want a preliminary assessment of the data by 1800 hours today. Use only secure systems. Tell no one what you are reviewing and report directly to me. No one else. He paused. And Lieutenant, if Major Kendrick or anyone else tries to take that drive from you, you come to me immediately. Something about his reaction to your return concerns me. Chun felt validation mixed with dread. You think he might be involved, sir? I think I do not know who to trust right now, Morrison said. which is a terrible position for a commander. So until we have facts, we trust no one. Clear? Clear, sir. Morrison handed the drive back. Use the SCIF in Building 7. It is isolated and secure. Take Staff Sergeant Rodriguez with you. 2 sets of eyes on this data. Chun and Rodriguez left the TOC and headed for the sensitive compartmented information facility, a hardened structure designed for reviewing classified materials. As they walked, Chun noticed movement near the motor pool. Kendrick was on his phone, pacing, his body language agitated. He glanced in their direction, saw them watching, and abruptly ended his call. He is reporting to someone, Rodriguez said quietly. The question is who? Chun replied. Inside the SCEF, they locked the door and activated the security protocols that prevented electronic surveillance. Chun inserted the drive into an air-gapped computer system that had no connection to any network. The drive contained 3 folders labeled Personnel, Operations, and Transactions. Chun opened Personnel first. What she found made her hands go cold. Detailed dossiers on 15 American officers and NCOs, ranging from captain to full colonel. Each file contains service records, financial data, and something else. Communications intercepts, photographs of meetings, evidence of coordination with local militia leaders and known smugglers. Rodriguez leaned over her shoulder. Mother of God, these are our people. I know half these names. That is Captain Brennan from 3rd Battalion. That is Colonel Hayes from Brigade. If this is real, if these officers are actually running criminal operations. Chun opened the operations folder. Inside were mission reports, but not ones she recognized from official channels. These were unauthorized ops, small unit movements in areas that had been declared off-limits, meetings with assets who appeared nowhere in the official intelligence database, pattern analysis that showed a parallel command structure operating alongside the legitimate military presence. This is insane, Rodriguez breathed. This is an entire shadow organization. The transactions folder contained financial records, bank accounts in Dubai, Qatar, and Pakistan, wire transfers totaling millions of dollars, commodity shipments logged with military manifests, but showing up in civilian markets. It was comprehensive, detailed, and damning. But was it real? Chun spent the next 4 hours cross-referencing the data against official records she could access through the secure system. The personnel files matched real people. The dates aligned with actual operations. The financial transactions corresponded to times when those officers had been in country. Everything Webb had given them appeared legitimate. There was one name that kept appearing throughout the files with increasing frequency. Major Douglas Kendrick, executive officer, current posting. The evidence suggested he was not just part of the network. He was running it at the tactical level. Rodriguez saw it at the same time Chun did. Kendrick. That is why he tried to take the drive. He knew what was on it. Or suspected, Chun said. Either way, we just became a threat to him. She checked her watch. 1,600 hours. 2 hours until her deadline with Morrison. She began compiling her findings into a concise report, documenting everything systematically. As she worked, a new message appeared on the secure terminal. It had no sender identification, but the content made Chun's blood run cold. You should not have looked at that data. You should have given it to me. Now we have a problem. Fix it, or I will fix it for you. You have until midnight to decide whose side you are on. Rodriguez read over her shoulder. That is a threat. That is a direct threat against a commissioned officer. Chun saved her report and ejected the drive. We need to get this to Morrison now, before Kendrick realizes we have already reviewed everything. They locked down the SCIF and moved quickly across the compound. The sun was setting, casting long shadows between buildings. Chun had the distinct feeling of being watched, tracked. Her hand drifted to her sidearm. They were 20 meters from the TOC when the explosion ripped through Building 7. The blast wave knocked them both flat. Chun's ears rang as she rolled to her feet, instinctively moving toward cover. The SCIF was engulfed in flames, structural supports collapsing inward. Anyone inside would have been killed instantly. Rodriguez grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a concrete barrier. If we had still been in there, he shouted over the ringing in her ears. We will be dead. Chun finished. Someone just tried to kill us. And they just destroyed the only secure facility where we could have safely stored the evidence. She clutched the data drive in her pocket, suddenly aware that it was the only copy. Webb had trusted her with this, had risked exposure to give it to her. And now someone was willing to commit murder on a military base to prevent that information from reaching the right people. Morrison emerged from the TOC, taking in the destruction with the commander's quick assessment. He spotted Chun and Rodriguez and ran over. "Are you two all right?" "We're fine, sir," Chun said. "But the SCIF is gone. And I think Major Kendrick just showed us exactly who he is working for." Morrison's expression went from concerned to furious. "Get inside, both of you. We're going to have a very serious conversation about what happens next. And then we're going to figure out how to survive long enough to see these bastards brought to justice." Morrison ordered the base locked down within minutes of the explosion. No one in, no one out. He confined Kendrick to quarters under guard, citing security concerns pending investigation. The major had protested loudly, threatening to contact brigade, but Morrison had pulled rank with a coldness that shocked everyone present. "Until I determine what caused that explosion, no one moves without my authorization. That includes you, Major." Chun sat in Morrison's office with Rodriguez, the data drive between them on the desk like a live grenade. Morrison had reviewed her preliminary findings with increasing disbelief that had hardened into grim determination. "If even 10% of this is accurate, we have a crisis that goes beyond this FOB." "It is all accurate, sir," Chun said. "I cross-referenced everything. Names, dates, financial records. This network has been operating for at least 3 years, moving drugs and weapons under the cover of legitimate military operations." Morrison picked up his phone and dialed a number from memory. "This is Captain James Morrison, FOB Sherzai. Authentication code Whiskey Tango 779er. I need a secure line to the CID field office at Bagram. Priority 1. While they waited for the connection, Morrison looked at Chun. "Tell me about Webb's mental state. Could he have fabricated this to justify going rogue?" Chun had been asking herself the same question for hours. "No, sir. Marcus was always methodical, fact-based. He would not construct an elaborate conspiracy theory. If he says this is real, he has seen something that convinced him. But he could have been manipulated," Morrison said. "Turned by insurgents, fed false information designed to destabilize our operations." "Then why give me the evidence to verify independently?" Chun countered. "If this was disinformation, it would not hold up to scrutiny. But everything I found corroborates his claims." The phone connection went through. Morrison spoke rapidly, outlining the situation in broad strokes. Chun watched his face change as whoever was on the other end responded. Finally, he said, "Understood. We will maintain security until your team arrives." Morrison hung up and looked at them both. "CID is sending an investigation team, but they cannot get here until tomorrow morning. Until then, we are on our own." "What about Kendrick?" Rodriguez asked. "If he knows we have the evidence, he is going to make another move. Which is why you two are staying here under armed guard," Morrison said. "I'm also pulling together a small team of people I trust absolutely. Officers and NCOs who have no connection to anyone on that list. We're going to quietly secure key positions on this base and wait for CID." "Sir," Chun said carefully, "there's another option. Webb gave me 48 hours to act on this information. If we need backup, if we need someone who can operate outside the command structure, he might be willing to help." Morrison shook his head immediately. "Absolutely not. Webb is still a fugitive who has killed American personnel. Personnel who were part of the network," Chun said. "Everything Webb told me has proven true so far. What if he is right about the targets too? What if the people he shot were dirty?" Morrison stood and paced to the window. "Even if that is true, I cannot authorize cooperation with someone who is technically an enemy combatant. The legal implications alone would end my career." "With respect, sir, your career is already over if Kendrick gets to you first," Rodriguez said bluntly. "The major has shown he is willing to blow up buildings on his own base. What makes you think he would hesitate to arrange an accident for you?" The office fell silent. Morrison turned back to face them. You are right, which is why I'm sending you both off base tonight. Sir, Chun protested. That is an order, Lieutenant. Morrison cut her off. You're the only ones who have reviewed that evidence in detail. If something happens to me, if Kendrick makes his move, you need to survive long enough to get that drive to CID. Rodriguez, you're going with her. Take one of the intelligence vehicles, civilian plates. Drive to Bagram tonight. Do not stop. Do not contact anyone on this base. What about you? Chun asked. I will be fine, Morrison said. I have survived 2 deployments and a divorce. I can handle 1 corrupt major. Now get your gear and go. That is a direct order. Chun and Rodriguez gathered their equipment quickly, moving through the darkened base with heightened awareness. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every sound could be an ambush. They reached the motor pool and found the vehicle Morrison had specified, a beat-up Toyota that could pass for local transportation. Rodriguez checked the engine while Chun secured their gear. As she worked, movement caught her eye, a figure approaching from the direction of the officer quarters. She put her hand on her sidearm, then recognized the awkward gait. Specialist Torres, the radio operator. Lieutenant Chun, Torres called out quietly. I need to talk to you. It is important. Chun glanced at Rodriguez, who had noticed Torres and moved to a flanking position. What is it, Specialist? Torres looked around nervously. I have been monitoring communications like Captain Morrison ordered, looking for anything unusual. I found something. Major Kendrick made a satellite call about an hour ago. I recorded it. Let me hear it, Chun said. Torres pulled out a small recording device. The audio was scratchy, but clear enough. Kendrick's voice came through first. We have a problem. Chun and Rodriguez reviewed the data. They know everything. Then another voice, male, older, with authority. Handle it. Make it look like an accident. And retrieve that drive before CID arrives. Kendrick again. What about Morrison? The unknown voice responded. He is expendable if he gets in the way. Clean this up or you are on your own. Chun felt ice in her veins. Who was he talking to? Did you get a trace? Torres shook his head. Encrypted satellite uplink. But the receiving number had a Virginia area code. Pentagon exchange. This goes all the way to the top, Rodriguez said. This is not just some local corruption. This is command level. Chun made a decision. Torres, you are coming with us. If Kendrick realizes you have this recording, you are a target. But Captain Morrison ordered me to maintain communications, Torres protested. And I am ordering you to preserve your life, Chun said. Get in the vehicle. Now. They drove through the gates using Morrison's authorization codes. The guards waved them through without question. As they pulled onto the main highway heading east toward Bagram, Chun allowed herself a moment to breathe. They had made it out. They had the evidence. They just needed to survive the next 6 hours. Then the headlights appeared behind them. 2 vehicles, moving fast, closing the distance rapidly. Rodriguez saw them in the mirror. We have company, and they're not friendly. Chun grabbed her rifle. How far to Bagram? 90 kilometers, Rodriguez said. But we will never make it if they force us off the road. The pursuing vehicles accelerated, engines roaring in the night. Chun could see armed men in the beds of both trucks. Not insurgents. American uniforms. Kendrick had sent his people after them. Torres was pale in the back seat. What do we do? Chun thought fast. There is a village 3 kilometers ahead. Narrow streets, lots of cover. If we can reach it, we can lose them in the maze. Rodriguez pushed the accelerator down. The old Toyota protested, but responded, gaining speed on the straightaway. Behind them, the pursuit vehicles matched their pace. One of them pulled alongside, and Chun saw the passenger raising a rifle. Get down, she shouted. The rear window exploded as automatic fire raked across their vehicle. Rodriguez swerved hard, forcing the pursuing truck toward the shoulder. Tires squealed. The attacker fell back momentarily. The village lights appeared ahead. Rodriguez took the turn at dangerous speed, the Toyota sliding sideways before finding traction. They plunged into the warren of streets, buildings pressing close on both sides. Behind them, the pursuit vehicles followed, but the narrow roads limited their maneuverability. Rodriguez threaded through the village with desperate precision, taking random turns, trying to shake their pursuers. For a moment, Chen thought they might actually escape. Then they rounded a corner and found a road blocked. A truck parked sideways, men with weapons taking positions behind it. "Ambush," Rodriguez said. He slammed the brakes and threw the vehicle into reverse. But the pursuing trucks had caught up, blocking their escape. They were trapped in a kill box, surrounded by men who wore American uniforms but served a different master. Chen grabbed the radio. "Phantom 7 to any station. We are under attack. Grid coordinate November Victor 491305. Requesting immediate assistance." Static answered. Then a new voice came through the speaker. A voice she recognized. "This is Phantom Actual. I have your position. Hang on, Sarah. Help is coming." "Marcus," Chen breathed. The radio crackled and went silent. Around them, the armed men were closing in, weapons raised. They had perhaps 30 seconds before the shooting started. Chen looked at Rodriguez and Torres. "Whatever happens, protect that drive. Make sure it reaches CAD." Rodriguez checked his ammunition. "We are not dying here, Lieutenant. Not today." The first shots rang out, but they did not come from the men surrounding them. They came from above, from the rooftops. Precision fire, each round finding its target with impossible accuracy. The ambushers dove for cover, confusion spreading through their ranks. Someone was shooting at them from the darkness, and whoever it was did not miss. Chen saw the muzzle flashes from 3 different positions. Not one shooter. Multiple shooters, coordinated, professional. Webb had not come alone. He had brought a team. The firefight lasted less than 2 minutes. When it ended, 6 of Kendrick's men were wounded. The rest had fled, and the street was quiet except for the ringing in Chen's ears. A figure dropped from a rooftop 20 meters away, landing in a crouch. Marcus Webb walked toward their vehicle, rifle slung across his chest, eyes scanning for additional threats. "You called for help," he said. "I delivered. Now get in one of those trucks and follow me. We need to move before reinforcements arrive." "Who are they?" Chen asked, gesturing to the rooftops where the other shooters remained hidden. "Friends," Webb said. "People who believe what we are fighting for is worth dying for. Now move, Sarah. We have a long night ahead of us and a lot of people who want us dead." Webb led them through a series of back roads that seemed to exist only in his memory. The stolen truck rattled over terrain that barely qualified as passable, but he drove with absolute confidence. Chen sat in the passenger's seat, rifle across her lap, watching him navigate by starlight and instinct. Rodriguez and Torres were in the back, maintaining security and monitoring their 6 for pursuit. After 30 minutes of silence, Webb finally spoke. "The team that helped extract you. Those are former Afghan National Army soldiers I worked with during my first deployment. Good men who got burned by the same people who tried to kill me. When I survived the ambush, they took me in, taught me how to disappear. And when I told them what I found, what was really happening, they decided to help." "So you built your own network," Chen said, "running counter-operations against the corruption." "I built a resistance," Webb corrected. "Because that is what this is, Sarah. Resistance against an occupying force that wears the same uniform we do, but serves only themselves." He glanced at her. "Did you verify the data?" "Every byte," Chen said. "Financial records, communications intercepts, operational logs. It is all real, Marcus. Colonel Hayes, Captain Brennan, Major Kendrick. They have been running drugs and weapons for 3 years, using military resources to build their empire. And now they know, Webb said, which makes you the most dangerous person in Afghanistan. That drive you are carrying is a death sentence. Not if we get it to CID, Chen said. Morrison called them before we left. Investigation team arrives at Sherzai tomorrow morning. Webb shook his head. You think CID is clean? You think this network does not have people embedded in every level of military law enforcement? Sarah, these people have been operating for 3 years without getting caught. They have protectors. They have contingencies. You walk into Bagram with that evidence, and you will disappear before you clear the gate. Then what do you suggest? Chen asked, frustration bleeding in her voice. We cannot just run forever. Eventually, they will find us. We do not run, Webb said. We attack. He turned off the road onto what looked like pure wilderness. After 100 meters, structures emerged from the darkness. An old compound, larger than the one where they had met that morning. Webb drove through gates that opened ahead of them and closed behind, operated by men Chun could not see but knew were watching. The compound interior was surprisingly well organized. Generator lights illuminated a command post setup that would have impressed any FOB. Maps covered the walls, communications equipment lined one table, and weapon racks held enough firepower for a small war. 3 men stood as Webb entered, and Chun recognized the professional bearing of trained soldiers despite their civilian clothing. "This is Lieutenant Chun and Staff Sergeant Rodriguez from FOB Sherzai," Webb announced. "They have the evidence we need." Chun, Rodriguez, meet Almaty, Farouk, and Rashid, former ANA, current freedom fighters. The 3 men nodded respectfully. Almaty, the oldest, spoke in accented but excellent English. "We have heard much about you, Lieutenant. Marcus speaks highly of your skills and integrity." Chun felt uncomfortable being praised by men who were technically outside the legal framework. "We appreciate the rescue, but we need to understand what we are walking into here. What you're walking into is a chance to actually fix this," Webb said. He spread a map across the table. "The network operates through a hub at FOB Kandahar. That is where Colonel Hayes coordinates operations, where the money flows through, where orders originate. He has a secure server there with backup copies of all transactions. Every dirty deal, every payoff, every operation. If we can access that server, we can get evidence that even the Pentagon cannot ignore." Rodriguez studied the map. Kandahar is a major installation. Hundreds of personnel, multiple layers of security. You're talking about infiltrating a fortified base. "I'm talking about walking in the front gate," Webb said, "because we're going to use something they will never expect. The truth." He pulled out a tablet and brought up a file. "Tomorrow morning, a CVD team arrives at Sherzai to investigate the SCIF explosion. What Kendrick does not know is that I have contacts inside CD. Real investigators, not network puppets. I have been feeding them information for months, building a case. When they arrive tomorrow, they're going to find Captain Morrison very much alive and very willing to testify. They are also going to receive a comprehensive intelligence package about network operations." Chun felt hope stirring. "Morrison is part of this. You have been coordinating with him?" "Not directly," Webb said, "but I made sure certain information reached him through channels he would trust. The SCIF explosion was unfortunate, but also proved Kendrick's guilt beyond doubt. Morrison is smart. He will use that. So the CVD investigation is legitimate," Chun said. "We have allies." "At Sherzai?" "Yes," Webb confirmed. "But Hayes will know within hours that the investigation is active. He will start purging evidence, eliminating witnesses, covering tracks. Which is why we need to hit Kandahar first. Seize that server before he can wipe it." Farouk leaned over the map. "The security at Kandahar FOB is formidable. Direct assault is suicide. Which is why we are not assaulting," Webb said. "We are going to arrest him. Official orders, proper authority, completely by the book." He looked at Chun. "How would you like to be a CID special agent for a day?" Chun stared at him. "You want to fake credentials? That is insane." "Not fake," Webb said. "Real credentials, real authority, just temporarily borrowed." He pulled up another file showing CID identification cards and authorization documents. "I have been preparing this contingency for months. All we need is someone with military bearing, intelligence background, and absolute conviction." He met her eyes. "Someone like you." The plan was audacious to the point of ridiculous. Chun would pose as a CD agent, Rodriguez as her security escort, arriving at Kandahar with arrest warrants for Colonel Hayes and 3 other senior officers. Webb and his team would provide overwatch and extraction support. They would walk in, serve the warrants, seize Hayes' server and files, and walk out before anyone realized the CD credentials were manufactured. "This will never work," Rodriguez said. "Hayes will verify our credentials within minutes." 5 minutes, Webb agreed, which is all the time we need if everyone plays their part perfectly. He looked around the table. "I know what I'm asking. This crosses every line. If we fail, we're not just dead. We are traitors. But if we succeed, we take down a criminal enterprise that has killed American soldiers and Afghan civilians for profit. Torres spoke up for the first time since the ambush. I am in. They try to kill me tonight. They would have killed Lieutenant Chun and Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. These people need to face justice. Amadi nodded. We have lost friends to this corruption. Brothers who trusted American promises and died because of Hayes' greed. If there's a chance to stop him, we take it. Chun looked at the map, at the photographs of Hayes and his network, at the mission plan that seemed impossible. Then she thought about Okoye and the others who died in that ambush. About Morrison risking his career to do the right thing. About Marcus Webb, who had given up everything to fight this war within a war. When do we leave? She asked. Webb smiled. For hours. We hit them at dawn when shift change creates maximum confusion. He handed her a CID badge with her photo already embedded. Welcome to law enforcement, Agent Chun. Try not to get us all killed. The next 4 hours passed in intense preparation. Chun memorized her cover story, studied Hayes' daily routine, rehearsed the arrest procedure until she could execute it in her sleep. Rodriguez checked weapons and equipment with professional thoroughness. Torres worked with the communications gear, establishing encrypted channels and jamming protocols. Webb took Chun aside as the others prepared. You understand what you're doing, right? Once we start this, there is no going back. Even if we succeed, even if we get Hayes, you're going to have a lot of explaining to do about how you ended up working with me. I know, Chun said. But Marcus, this is bigger than careers or protocols. This is about whether we stand for anything real. If we let fear stop us from fighting corruption, then everything we claimed to believe in was a lie. Webb studied her face in the dim light. I never should have left you behind. After the ambush, after I disappeared, I should have found a way to tell you I was alive. You did what you had to do to survive, Chun said. And now you are doing what you have to do to make it right. That is all any of us can do. He reached out and gripped her shoulder. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know something. Working with you, training with you, deploying with you. That was the best time of my military career. You made me better, Sarah. Made me want to be worthy of that partnership. Chun felt emotion tightening her throat. You were always worthy, Marcus. You just forgot for a while. But you are remembering now. That is what matters. Amadi called out. It is time. Vehicles are ready. They loaded into 3 trucks. Chun and Rodriguez in the lead vehicle with forged CD credentials and arrest warrants. Webb and his Afghan team in support vehicles with contingency plans for 20 different ways this could go wrong. As they pulled out of the compound into the pre-dawn darkness, Chun felt the weight of what they were attempting settle over her. They were driving into the heart of enemy territory to arrest a full colonel with an empire worth millions and nothing to lose. They were doing it with fake badges, borrowed authority, and a desperate hope that audacity could overcome firepower. And they were doing it because no one else would. Because sometimes the right thing was also the impossible thing, and you did it anyway. Rodriguez must have sensed her thoughts. You know this is crazy, right? He said it quietly, almost conversationally. Completely insane, Chun agreed. Good, Rodriguez said. Just wanted to make sure we were on the same page. He checked his rifle one more time. Let us go arrest ourselves a colonel. The gates of FOB Kandahar appeared through the morning haze at exactly 0600. Chun sat in the passenger seat wearing a CID badge and carrying confidence she did not entirely feel. Rodriguez drove, his civilian contractor clothing and security contractor identification completing their cover. Behind them, 2 kilometers back and invisible, Webb and his team maintained overwatch positions. The gate guard was Army Young, following procedure. Chun handed over their credentials through the window. Special Agent Chun, CID. We have business with Colonel Hayes. Authorization codes are in the packet. The guard scanned their IDs, checked the computer system, and Chun held her breath. Webb had promised the credentials would hold up to initial screening. The question was how long before someone made a phone call that exposed them. The guard handed back their IDs. You're clear, ma'am. Colonel Hayes is in Building 12, Battalion Headquarters. You will need an escort. Protocol for CID visits. Understood, Chun said. We will wait here. 5 minutes later, a staff sergeant arrived in a Humvee. Chun and Rodriguez followed him through the sprawling base. Kandahar was 10 times the size of Sherzai, a small city of prefab buildings, operation centers, and support facilities. Somewhere in this maze, Colonel Hayes was probably drinking his morning coffee, completely unaware that his empire was about to collapse. Building 12 was a hardened structure with multiple security checkpoints. Chun showed her credentials at each one, her heart rate climbing with every scan. The staff sergeant led them to the 3rd floor, to an outer office where a captain sat behind a desk managing Hayes' schedule. The captain looked up with practiced irritation. Sid, we were not informed of any investigation. Chun handed him the arrest warrant. You are being informed now, Captain. We need to see Colonel Hayes immediately. Official business, time sensitive. The captain read the warrant, and Chun watched his face change from irritation to shock to calculation. Ma'am, this warrant accuses Colonel Hayes of criminal conspiracy, racketeering, and murder. These are serious allegations, which is why we need to speak with him now, Chun said firmly. Is he in his office? He is in a classified briefing, the captain said. It just started 10 minutes ago. Conference room at the end of the hall. Chun made a decision. We will wait in his office. We need to secure his files and computer per CID protocol. Please unlock his door. The captain hesitated. I should really contact Brigade Legal first. Captain, Rodriguez said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had dealt with obstruction before. Interfering with a CID investigation is a federal offense. Open the door, or we will open it ourselves and add you to the charges. The captain stood reluctantly and led them to Hayes' office. He unlocked it, then stepped back. I'm calling legal. You do that, Chun said. She and Rodriguez entered the office and closed the door. The moment they were alone, Rodriguez moved to the window while Chun went to the computer. We have maybe 3 minutes, Rodriguez said. That captain is absolutely making calls. Chun, plugged in the drive Webb had given her, a specialized device designed to clone hard drives in under 2 minutes. The computer was password protected, but Webb's contacts had provided Hayes' login credentials. The screen unlocked, and Chun initiated the cloning process. A progress bar appeared. 120 seconds to completion. The door opened behind them. Chun spun to find a full colonel standing there, mid-50s, hard eyes, and a presence that commanded any room he entered. Colonel Hayes wore his authority like armor, and his expression suggested he was not accustomed to surprises in his own office. Who the hell are you? He demanded. Chun stood, badge visible. Special Agent Chun, CID. Colonel Hayes, you're under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, and murder in the deaths of Staff Sergeant Okoye and 3 members of his reconnaissance team. Hayes stared at her for 3 long seconds. Then he laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Sid? He pulled out his phone. We will see about that. He started to dial. Rodriguez moved smoothly, placing himself between Hayes and the door. Sir, I need you to put down the phone and place your hands on the desk. Hayes' smile disappeared. Do you have any idea who you are threatening, Staff Sergeant? I have 20 years in this army. I have connections that go to the Joint Chiefs. Whatever amateur operation you think you are running here ends now. The computer chimed softly. Download complete. Chun ejected the drive and pocketed it. Your connections are the reason we are here, Colonel. They are also going to prison with you. Hayes moved faster than Chun expected for a man his age. His hand went to his sidearm, but Rodriguez was faster. The staff sergeant closed the distance and trapped Hayes' gun hand against his holster. For a moment, the 2 men struggled. Then Rodriguez twisted and Hayes went down hard, arm pinned behind his back. You just assaulted a superior officer, Hayes snarled. We just arrested a criminal, Rodriguez corrected. He zip-tied Hayes' wrists with professional efficiency. Chun keyed her radio. Package secure. Extraction in 3 minutes. Webb's voice came back immediately. Negative. You have company. Base security is mobilizing. Captain made the call, and Hayes has people everywhere. You need to move now. Chun looked at Rodriguez. Can you carry him? If I have to, Rodriguez said. But it would be easier if he walked. Hayes sneered at them. You're not leaving this base. I have 200 soldiers between you and that gate. The moment you step outside, you are dead. Chen grabbed Hayes by his collar and pulled him close. Those 200 soldiers do not know they are working for a traitor. But we have evidence. We have your financial records, your communications, your entire operation documented. When that goes public, when they see what you really are, how many do you think will still follow your orders? Hayes' confidence flickered. You are bluffing. You do not have anything. Chen pulled out the clone drive. Everything, Colonel. 3 years of transactions. Every payoff, every drug shipment, every weapon sale. We have it all. And in about 2 hours, it reaches people who cannot be bought. The office door burst open. 4 MPs entered, weapons raised. Everyone freeze. Hands where we can see them. Chen raised her hand slowly. We are CID. We have arrest authority. The MP sergeant checked his radio. We have orders to detain everyone in this office. Drop your weapons and get on the ground. Rodriguez caught Chen's eye. She gave the smallest nod. They complied, lowering themselves to the floor. The MPs secured them efficiently, confiscating their sidearms. Hayes was released from his zip ties and helped to his feet. Thank you, Sergeant, Hayes said, regaining his composure. These individuals are imposters. Fake CD credentials, attempting to steal classified materials. I want them to stockade immediately. The MP sergeant looked uncertain. Sir, their credentials scan legitimate. They are sophisticated forgeries, Hayes said smoothly. I have already contacted CD headquarters. Real agents are en route. Until they arrive, these prisoners are to be held incommunicado. No phone calls, no visitors, no access to communications. Clear? Clear, sir, the sergeant said. As they were led away in flex cuffs, Chun felt the weight of failure crushing down. They had been so close. The evidence was in her pocket, but if Hayes had them locked up and searched, it would disappear. Webb was out there somewhere, but even he could not assault a military stockade. They were marched across the compound under guard. Other soldiers watched curiously as the prisoners were led past. Chen kept her head up, refusing to show defeat. Rodriguez walked beside her, his expression calm despite their situation. As they approached the stockade, an explosion rocked the motor pool 200 meters away. The guards spun toward the sound, weapons raised. A second explosion followed, then a third. Smoke billowed into the morning sky. Alarms began wailing across the base. Attack, someone shouted. We are under attack. In the confusion, Chun felt Rodriguez tense beside her. The guards were distracted, focused on the explosions. This was their moment. Rodriguez moved first, dropping low and sweeping the legs of the nearest guard. Chun followed, shouldering into the second guard before he could raise his weapon. They ran. Flex cuffs still binding their wrists, they sprinted away from the stockade toward the perimeter fence. Behind them, guards shouted and gave chase. Ahead, Chun could see the fence line and beyond it, the desert that might offer escape. A Humvee screeched to a stop in their path. Chun prepared to fight, then recognized the driver. Torres behind the wheel, looking terrified but determined. Get in, he screamed. They dove into the vehicle. Torres accelerated before the doors were fully closed, tires spitting gravel. Bullets sparked off the armor as the guards opened fire. Torres drove like a maniac, weaving between buildings, heading for a section of fence that looked damaged. Where did you get this vehicle? Rodriguez shouted. Webb left it for me, Torres yelled back. Said you might need emergency extraction. He drove straight at the fence. Hold on. The Humvee hit the weakened section at 40 miles per hour. Chainlink screamed and gave way. They crashed through into the open desert beyond, the vehicle bouncing wildly over rough terrain. Behind them, the base erupted into organized chaos as security forces tried to determine if they were under actual attack or experiencing a diversion. Chun twisted in her seat, cutting Rodriguez's flex cuffs with a piece of torn metal, then having him do the same for her. She keyed her radio. Webb, we are clear but hot. Hayes is still on base, and he knows we have a drive. Webb's voice came through calm and steady. Extraction Point Charlie. 2 clicks northwest. We will be there in 4 minutes. And Sarah? The explosions were just the opening act. The real show starts now. Torres drove toward the coordinates, the stolen Humvee protesting but holding together. Chun checked her pocket. The drive was still there, still secure. They had failed to arrest Hayes, but they had succeeded in getting his evidence. Now, they just had to survive long enough to deliver it. She looked at Rodriguez and Torres, both of them covered in dust and determination. "We did good back there," she said. "Against impossible odds, we got what we came for." Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Now comes the hard part, staying alive long enough to use it." The extraction point appeared ahead, a cluster of rocks where two vehicles waited. Webb stood beside them, rifle ready, scanning the horizon. As Torres pulled up, Chun saw Ahmadi, Farouk, and Rashid taking defensive positions. This was it. The team was together, the evidence was secured, and somewhere behind them, Colonel Hayes was mobilizing every resource he had to hunt them down. Webb opened her door. "Welcome back. How did it feel to arrest a colonel?" "Ask me when we actually get him in handcuffs," Chun said. "Right now, it just feels like we kicked a hornet's nest." Webb grinned. "That is because you did. But hornets can be dealt with if you know where to strike." He held up his own tablet. "While you were playing CD, I was uploading everything we have to 6 different secure locations. Journalists, congressional oversight committees, DOD, Inspector General. By noon, this story breaks wide open. Hayes can run, but he cannot hide from the truth." Chun felt hope kindle again. "Then we won," she said. "We survived," Webb corrected. "Winning comes later, when Hayes and everyone in his network faces a court-martial." "But yes, Sarah, we survived, and that is something." They drove hard for 20 minutes before Webb called a halt at a pre-positioned cache site. The location was a cave system that had been used by resistance fighters for generations, offering concealment and defensive advantages. As they unloaded equipment and established security, Chen's radio crackled with multiple frequencies. Military traffic, all of it focused on one thing: finding them. "All units be advised," a dispatcher announced. "For fugitives are considered armed and extremely dangerous. Shoot-on-sight authorization is in effect. Repeat, deadly force is authorized." "Hayes is not playing around," Rodriguez said. "Shoot-on-sight means he has convinced command we are enemy combatants." Webb checked his tactical display. "We have maybe 2 hours before they establish a cordon we cannot break through. After that, we are trapped in this valley with every available asset hunting us." Chun pulled out the clone drive. "Then we need to make sure this reaches the right people before that happens." "You said you uploaded everything already." "To secure servers?" "Yes," Webb confirmed. "But servers can be hacked, files can be deleted, evidence can disappear if you know the right people to bribe. What we need is someone beyond Hayes' reach who can take this public immediately." "There is someone," Chun said slowly. "A journalist, embedded with 3rd Brigade last year. She did a series on procurement fraud. Won awards for investigative reporting. If anyone would run with this story, it would be her." Webb pulled up a communications interface. "Name?" "Rebecca Stokes," Chun said. "She works for the Washington Standard. Last I heard, she was in Kabul covering the transition." Webb's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Found her. She has a satellite phone registered to the Standard's Kabul bureau." He looked at Chun. "You trust her?" "I trust her to pursue the truth no matter where it leads," Chun said. "That is all we need." Webb established an encrypted connection and handed Chun the phone. "Make it count. We get one shot at this before Hayes triangulates our signal." The phone rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered, cautious and alert. "This is Stokes." "Rebecca, this is Lieutenant Sarah Chun. We met at FOB Ghazni last year. I need you to listen very carefully because I am about to give you the biggest story of your career." 15 minutes later, Chun had outlined the entire conspiracy. The criminal network, Hayes' operation, the evidence they had gathered, and their current situation. Stokes had listened without interrupting, her journalist instincts recognizing truth when she heard it. "Send me everything," Stokes said. "I have secure channels. If what you're telling me checks out, I can have this story filed within an hour." "But Lieutenant, you understand what this means? Once this goes public, there is no putting it back. Every military career, even peripherally involved, gets destroyed." "That is the point," Chun said. These people need to face consequences. Agreed, Stokes said. Uploading secure transfer link now. Send the files. Webb transferred the clone drive contents through the encrypted channel. They watched the progress bar climb, each percentage point representing justice inching closer. At 90%, the connection stuttered. They are jamming us, Webb said. Hayes must have cyber warfare teams tracking the signal. He rerouted through 3 different proxy servers. The transfer resumed. 100%. Files received. Stokes confirmed. I have everything. Lieutenant, I need you to know something. What you have done today, exposing this corruption, this is going to save lives. But it is also going to make you a target for a long time. People like Hayes have long memories and longer reach. I know, Chin said, but some things are worth the risk. Stay alive long enough for me to interview you properly, Stokes said. This story needs your voice. She ended the call. Webb shut down the communications equipment and began packing it. We need to move. That signal gave them our general location. They will have air assets overhead within 20 minutes. Where do we go? Torres asked. Every base in Afghanistan will be looking for us. We go to the only place they cannot touch us, Webb said. We go to the media. If Stokes is as good as Chun says, the story will break before noon. Once we are public, once our faces are on every news outlet, Hayes cannot make us disappear quietly. So we make ourselves very public. We drive to Kabul, walk into the Standards Bureau, and tell our story on camera. That is insane, Rodriguez said. Kabul is 3 hours away. We will never make it. Webb smiled, which is why we are not driving the whole way. He pointed to the tactical display. There is a French military convoy passing through Maidanshar in 90 minutes. Humanitarian aid delivery. They have invited international press to document it. We hijack their convoy's press vehicle, embed ourselves with the journalists, and ride all the way to Kabul under protection of a neutral foreign military. How do we hijack a press vehicle? Chin asked. We do not, Webb said. We buy our way on. Ahmadi has contacts with the Afghan journalists covering the convoy. For the right price, they will add 4 more crew members to their roster. Ahmadi nodded. I have already made the call. $5,000 American dollars. They will have credentials waiting. Where do we get $5,000? Torres asked. Webb pulled out a thick envelope. From Hayes' office safe. While you were downloading his computer, I was accessing his emergency funds. Call it seized assets pending trial. They moved out immediately, abandoning the cave system and traveling overland to avoid checkpoints. The terrain was brutal, but offered concealment. Chin rode with Webb in the lead vehicle, Rodriguez and Torres following with the Afghan team. You planned all of this, Chan said as they navigated a dry riverbed. The extraction, the journalist contact, the convoy infiltration. How long have you been preparing? Months, Webb admitted. Since I first confirmed Hayes was dirty. I knew eventually it would come to this. A moment where everything broke open and we either succeeded completely or failed catastrophically. I just did not know you would be part of it until you showed up at that compound 2 days ago. Would you have done it without me? Chin asked. Eventually, Webb said. But having you here, having someone I trust absolutely watching my back, it makes the impossible feel achievable. He glanced at her. I meant what I said before. Working with you was the best time of my career. I would not want to end it with anyone else. We are not ending anything, Chin said. We're just getting started. Once this breaks, once Hayes goes down, there will be investigations for months. Testimony, depositions, trials. You realize you're going to be the star witness in the biggest military corruption case in decades. If I survive that long, Webb said. Hayes still has resources. Once he knows we have gone public, he becomes desperate. Desperate men do desperate things. Then we stay together, Chun said. Watch each other's backs like we always did. Like partners should. Partners, Webb repeated. He smiled. I like the sound of that. They reached the rendezvous point with 15 minutes to spare. The Afghan journalists were waiting with credentials as promised. Chin studied her new press badge. Sarah Channing, photojournalist. Close enough to her real name that she would answer to it naturally. The French convoy arrived precisely on schedule. 12 vehicles, including 2 carrying international press. The Afghan journalists introduced them to the convoy commander, a French captain who barely glanced at their credentials before waving them aboard. The press vehicle was crowded with reporters, cameramen, and equipment. Perfect camouflage. As the convoy pulled out, Chun felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. They were surrounded by neutral military forces, embedded with international media, and heading towards safety. For the first time in 30 hours, survival seemed plausible. Rodriguez must have felt the same. "We might actually make it," he said quietly. "Do not jinx it," Torres whispered back. The convoy traveled smoothly for the first hour, the French maintaining professional security. Then the radio traffic changed. Chun caught fragments of urgent French transmissions. American forces were requesting the convoy halt and submit to inspection. Fugitives believed to be traveling with press contingent. The French captain came on the internal speaker. "We have been ordered to stop for American military inspection. All personnel will present identification and submit to search. This is not optional." Webb caught Chin's eye across the crowded vehicle. "We have a problem. If American MPs board this convoy, we are done." Hayes must have figured out a route. "What do we do?" Chin asked. "We give them what they want," Webb said. He stood and addressed the other journalists in French, then English. "I apologize for the deception. We are not press. We are American military personnel carrying evidence of criminal activity. In approximately 5 minutes, MPs will board this vehicle to arrest us. You can either help us or stay out of the way. Your choice." An older French reporter, veteran enough to have seen everything, studied Webb carefully. "What kind of evidence?" "The kind that exposes a 3-year criminal conspiracy involving American officers selling weapons and drugs under cover of military operations," Chin said. "We have documentation. We have already sent it to the Washington Standard. The story breaks in less than an hour." The French reporter smiled slowly. "Then I think you need to be on camera when those MPs arrive. Nothing prevents an arrest like international media coverage." He turned to his cameraman. "Set up. We are about to document something interesting." By the time the American MPs arrived, every camera in the press vehicle was rolling. Chun stood in the center of the frame, Webb beside her, surrounded by international journalists. The lead MP climbed aboard and stopped short, suddenly aware he was being filmed by a dozen news outlets. "I need you to come with me," the MP said carefully. "On what charges?" Chin asked, her voice clear and steady. "Unauthorized absence, impersonating CD personnel, theft of classified materials." "The classified materials you're referring to are evidence of criminal conspiracy reaching to the Pentagon level," Chun said. "Evidence we have already transmitted to investigative journalists and oversight committees. You can arrest us, Sergeant, but you cannot stop the story. It is already out there." The MP looked uncertain. "Ma'am, I have my orders. And I understand that," Chin said. "But I need you to understand something too. The officers who gave you those orders are the same ones we are exposing. They're using you to cover up their crimes. In about 30 minutes, when the story breaks, you're going to have to decide whose side you were on when it mattered." The MP stood there, cameras recording every second, visibly wrestling with duty and doubt. Finally, his radio crackled. "All units stand down. Repeat, stand down and return to base. New orders from brigade." The MP looked at Chin one more time, then nodded slowly. "Good luck, Lieutenant." He turned and left the vehicle. As the convoy resumed movement toward Kabul, the French reporter approached Chun. "That was quite a performance. You have done this before?" "First time," Chin admitted, "but I had good motivation. The truth should not be this hard to defend." "Yet it always is," the reporter said. He extended his hand. "François Mercier, Le Monde. I would very much like to hear the full story when we reach Kabul." "You will," Chun promised. "Everyone will." The Washington Standard story broke at 11:43 local time. Chun watched it happen on a tablet inside the Standard's Kabul bureau, surrounded by reporters, cameras, and the growing awareness that they had actually succeeded. The headline read, "Military Corruption Ring Exposed. Officers accused of drug and weapons trafficking." Rebecca Stokes's byline sat beneath it, and the article pulled no punches. Within minutes, every major news outlet picked up the story. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera. The photographs Chun had provided from the clone drive appeared across screens worldwide. Colonel Hayes in a meeting with known arms dealers. Financial transactions showing millions moving through shell accounts. Communications intercepts proving coordination between American officers and criminal networks. The phones in the bureau began ringing constantly. Other journalists seeking confirmation, military public affairs demanding retractions, congressional staffers requesting interviews. The story had detonated like a bomb in the Pentagon, and the shockwave was still spreading. Francois Mercier set up his camera in the bureau's interview room. Chin sat across from him with Webb, Rodriguez, and Torres. The Afghan team had declined to appear on camera, preferring to remain anonymous for their own protection. Ahmadi had simply clasped Chin's hand and said, "You did what we could not. You made them see. That is enough." Mercier began the interview with straightforward questions. How did you discover the conspiracy? What evidence did you gather? How did you manage to escape? Chin answered honestly, methodically, building the case point by point. Webb provided technical details about the network's operations. Rodriguez described the attempts to silence them. Torres spoke about the explosion at FOB Sherzai that nearly killed them all. But it was when Mercier asked about motivation that Chun felt the weight of everything they had been through. Why risk your life for this, Lieutenant Chun? You could have simply reported what you suspected through proper channels and let others investigate. Chun thought about Okoye and his team, killed in an ambush that should never have happened. About Morrison, risking his career to do what was right. About Marcus Webb, who had given up everything to fight corruption that was killing his fellow soldiers. Because proper channels were compromised, she said. Because good soldiers were dying while officers profited. Because sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. And if we're not willing to break rules to stop injustice, then the rules become worthless. She looked directly at the camera. The military taught me honor, courage, and commitment. Those are not just words. They're standards we have to live up to even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. The interview concluded and Mercier stood, shaking each of their hands. This will air on every network by tonight. Your story, your courage, it will matter. People will see what you sacrificed to expose this corruption. As they left the interview room, Chin's phone rang. Morrison's name appeared on the screen. She answered immediately. "Sir?" "Lieutenant Chun," Morrison said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. "I have been trying to reach you for 6 hours. Are you safe?" "We are in Kabul, sir. At the Standard Bureau. We are alive." "Thank God," Morrison said. "Listen, things are moving fast here. CID arrived this morning and placed Major Kendrick under arrest. He is singing like a canary, giving up everyone in the network to save himself. They have also issued warrants for Colonel Hayes and 14 other officers across 3 bases." "Hayes is still free?" Chin asked. "For now," Morrison said, "but not for long. He made a run for it when the story broke. Tried to reach the Pakistani border. Air assets tracked him to a compound outside Kandahar. He is surrounded. It is over for him." Chun felt vindication wash through her. "And Webb? What is his status?" Morrison paused. "That is complicated. Technically, he is still AWOL and has killed personnel, even if they were dirty. There will have to be a full investigation, a court-martial. But Lieutenant, between us, I am going to recommend clemency. What Webb did exposing this network when no one else could, that count for something. The Army owes him." "Thank you, sir," Chin said. "That means everything." "One more thing," Morrison added. "The CID lead investigator wants to speak with you. All of you. They're flying to Kabul tomorrow to take your full statements. This is going to be a long process, Chun. Months of testimony, depositions, trials. You ready for that?" "We are ready, sir," Chun said. "We will see this through to the end." She hung up and turned to find Webb watching her. "Morrison recommending clemency?" "He is," Chun confirmed. "It is not a guarantee, but it is a start." Webb nodded slowly. "I never thought I would see the day where doing the right thing might not end with a firing squad." He smiled. "Thank you, Sarah, for believing in me when you had every reason not to." "You gave me reason to believe," Chin said. "You could have disappeared after that ambush. Could have taken what you knew and sold it to the highest bidder. Instead, you fought to expose it. That is the Marcus Webb I remember. That is the soldier you still are. Before Webb could respond, Torres called out from across the room. You need to see this. Turn on the news. They gathered around the television where a breaking news alert was playing. American military forces have apprehended Colonel Thomas Hayes attempting to flee Afghanistan. Hayes, accused of running a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise, was taken into custody without incident. The screen showed footage of Hayes in flex cuffs being loaded onto a helicopter, his face blank with defeat. Rodriguez let out a long breath. It is really over. They got him. The Bureau erupted in activity as journalists scrambled to cover the latest developments. Chin stepped outside into the Kabul afternoon, needing air and space to process everything. Webb followed her onto the balcony. They stood in silence for a moment, looking out over the city. Finally, Webb spoke. What happens to us now? After the investigations, after the trials? What do we do? Chun considered the question. We rebuild. We prove that the system can work when good people refuse to accept corruption. We show that honor still means something. Sounds optimistic, Webb said. It is, Chun agreed. But we earn the right to be optimistic. We fought for it. We bled for it. We survived it. Webb smiled. Partners to the end? Partners to the end, Chun confirmed. The next morning brought more developments. Hayes' arrest triggered a cascade of additional charges as investigators uncovered the full scope of the network. Officers at 5 different bases were taken into custody. Civilian contractors were arrested. Bank accounts were frozen. The investigation that Chun and Webb had started was growing into the largest military corruption scandal in a generation. Chun spent the day providing detailed testimony to CID investigators. Every operation, every piece of evidence, every decision that had led them to this moment. The lead investigator, a major named Phillips, was thorough and professional. At the end of the session, Phillips closed her notebook and looked at Chin directly. Lieutenant, off the record, what you did was either incredibly brave or incredibly reckless. Probably both. But you exposed a cancer that was eating away at the integrity of this military. That takes courage most people do not have. I did not do it alone, Chin said. Without Webb, without Rodriguez and Torres, without Morrison and the others who helped, this never would have happened. Phillips nodded. The Army needs more people like you. People who care more about doing what is right than protecting their careers. She stood and extended her hand. Thank you for your service, Lieutenant. The real kind of service. That evening, Chun gathered with her team in the Bureau conference room. Morrison had sent word that they were being recalled to the States for additional testimony before a congressional committee. Their war in Afghanistan was over, but a different kind of battle was just beginning. Webb raised a bottle of water in mock toast to surviving the impossible and living to tell about it. They clinked bottles, and Chun felt something she had not felt in days. Peace. Not complete peace, because there were still trials ahead, still challenges to face. But the peace that came from knowing they had done the right thing, regardless of cost. Rodriguez looked at the group. So what do we call ourselves? The team that took down a colonel? How about we just call ourselves soldiers, Torres suggested. Soldiers who remembered what the oath actually meant. I can live with that, Chin said. She looked at each of them in turn. Marcus, Rodriguez, Torres. Whatever comes next, whatever they throw at us, we face it together. No one gets left behind. No one gets left behind, they echoed. Through the window, Chun could see the Kabul skyline in the fading light. Somewhere in Afghanistan, soldiers were still serving, still fighting, still trying to make a difference. Some of them were good. Some of them were corrupt. But because of what her team had done, the corrupt ones would be looking over their shoulders. They would know that someone was watching. Someone who cared about justice more than convenience. Webb appeared beside her at the window. Thinking deep thoughts? Just thinking that we changed something, Chin said. Maybe not everything. Maybe not enough. But something. Sometimes something is all you can do, Webb said. And sometimes that is enough to matter. They stood together, watching the sun set over a city that had seen too much war and too little justice. But tonight, at least, justice had won a battle. And that was worth celebrating. The phone rang again. More interview requests, more congressional inquiries, more people who wanted to hear their story. Chun let it ring. There would be time for all of that tomorrow. Tonight belonged to the team, to the people who had risked everything to expose the truth. Tomorrow they would face the consequences. Tomorrow they would testify, defend their actions, justify their choices. But tonight, they were just soldiers who had done their duty. And that was enough. 3 months later, Chun stood outside the United States Capitol building wearing her dress uniform. The hearing was scheduled to begin in 20 minutes, and she was about to testify before the Senate Armed Services Committee about the largest military corruption scandal in decades. Beside her stood Webb, also in dress uniform, wearing the rank of sergeant he had earned before everything went sideways. Rodriguez and Torres flanked them, a united front. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind. Depositions, interviews, internal investigations. The Army had placed Chun on administrative leave, pending the outcome of multiple inquiries into her conduct. Some called her a hero. Others called her insubordinate. A few called her a traitor for working with Webb. She had learned to ignore the noise and focus on the truth. Webb had it worse. He faced a general court-martial for unauthorized absence, though the charges of killing American personnel had been dropped after evidence confirmed every target had been part of Hayes' network. His attorney was arguing necessity defense, claiming his actions were required to prevent greater harm. The outcome was uncertain. Hayes himself sat in a military prison awaiting trial on 47 counts ranging from racketeering to conspiracy to murder. Kendrick had cut a deal, testifying against 14 other officers in exchange for a reduced sentence. The network had collapsed completely, but the damage lingered. Ready for this? Rodriguez asked quietly. As ready as I will ever be, Chun replied. She had testified before military boards, but never before Congress. Never with cameras broadcasting to the entire nation. A staffer approached. Lieutenant Chun, they are ready for you. The hearing room was packed with senators, staff, media, and observers. Chun took her seat at the witness table, raised her right hand, and swore to tell the truth. The committee chairman, a silver-haired senator from Virginia, leaned forward. Lieutenant Chun, thank you for appearing today. Your testimony has been anticipated by this committee and the American people. Let me begin by asking you directly. Do you regret your actions in Afghanistan? Chun met his gaze. No, sir, I do not. I regret that those actions were necessary. I regret that proper channels have been so thoroughly compromised that we had no choice but to operate outside them. But I do not regret exposing a criminal conspiracy that cost American lives. The chairman nodded. Walk us through your decision-making process. At what point did you determine you needed to act outside the chain of command? Chun spent the next hour detailing everything. Webb's initial contact, the evidence on the drive, the attempts on their lives, the decision to go public. She spoke clearly, precisely, holding nothing back. When she described the explosion at FOB Shirzai, several senators exchanged glances. A senator from Arizona leaned into his microphone. Lieutenant, you worked with Sergeant Webb, a man who was AWOL and had engaged American personnel. How did you justify that collaboration? Sergeant Webb was not AWOL, Chun said firmly. He was operating under duress after surviving an ambush that was orchestrated by the very officers we were investigating. Every person he engaged was part of a criminal network. He was not fighting against America. He was fighting for it. That is a matter of interpretation, the senator countered. With respect, sir, it is a matter of evidence, Chun replied. The file Sergeant Webb provided documented 3 years of criminal activity. Without his courage in gathering that intelligence, Hayes and his network would still be operating today. How many more soldiers would have died in manufactured ambushes? How many more weapons would have reached our enemies? Sergeant Webb saw evil and fought it with the only tools available to him. That is not desertion. That is devotion to duty. The room fell silent. Then another senator, a decorated Marine veteran, spoke. Lieutenant Chun, there are some in the military who believe you should face charges for insubordination and unauthorized operations. What would you say to them? I would say that I understand their perspective. Chun answered. The military operates on discipline and chain of command for good reasons. But I would also ask them what they would have done in my position. When your chain of command is compromised, when doing the right thing means breaking the rules, what choice do you make? I chose to honor my oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, even when those enemies wore the same uniform I did. The hearing continued for 3 more hours. Webb testified next, his account corroborating Chin's in every detail. Rodriguez and Torres followed, describing the attempts to silence them and the explosion that nearly killed them all. By the time the session concluded, the mood in the room had shifted. The chairman made closing remarks. This committee has heard compelling testimony about systemic corruption and the courage required to expose it. We will be issuing a full report with recommendations for reforms to prevent such conspiracies in the future. But let me say for the record that Lieutenant Chen, Sergeant Webb, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, and Specialist Torres acted with extraordinary bravery and integrity. The Army should be proud of soldiers like these. Outside the Capitol, media swarmed them. Chen gave a brief statement praising the investigative process and expressing confidence in military justice. Then she, Webb, Rodriguez, and Torres escaped to a quiet restaurant where Morrison was waiting. The captain stood as they approached, a broad smile on his face. I watched the whole thing. You were magnificent. All of you. They sat, and for the first time in months, Chen felt like she could breathe. How bad is the fallout? She asked. Morrison became serious. 14 officers court-martialed, careers destroyed, millions in seized assets. The Army is embarrassed, angry, and desperate to prove this was an isolated incident. They want to make examples of Hayes and his network, while also showing they can police their own. And us, Webb asked, what happens to us? Morrison pulled out a folder. This is unofficial, but I have friends in JAG. Chen, your administrative leave is likely to end with a reprimand for unauthorized operations, but no criminal charges. You will keep your commission. Rodriguez and Torres are being recommended for commendations for actions under fire. And Webb, he looked at the sergeant. Your court-martial is scheduled for next month, but the prosecution is offering a deal. What kind of deal? Webb asked carefully. Time served, dishonorable discharge, but no prison time. They acknowledge extenuating circumstances. It is not perfect, but it keeps you out of Leavenworth. Webb absorbed this. I lose everything. My career, my benefits, my honor. You lose the uniform, Morrison corrected, but you keep your freedom and your integrity. What you did matters, Webb. It will always matter. A discharge cannot change that. Chen reached across the table and gripped Webb's hand. Whatever you decide, we support you. But Marcus, you are not losing your honor. You proved your honor by fighting when no one else would. Webb looked at each of them, his team, his family. Finally, he nodded. I will take the deal. I did not survive all of this to spend the next decade in prison. Morrison handed him the folder. Your attorney can review the details. But Webb, one more thing. I am writing a letter for your file. A commander's statement about your service, your sacrifice, your courage. It will not undo the discharge, but it will be part of your permanent record. Future employers, future opportunities, they will see that letter. They will know who you really are. Thank you, sir, Webb said quietly. They ordered dinner and spent the evening not as soldiers facing consequences, but as friends celebrating survival. Stories were shared, toasts were made, and for a few hours, the weight of everything they had been through lifted. As the night wound down, Chen walked outside with Webb. The Washington monuments glowed in the darkness, symbols of the ideals they had fought to protect. No regrets, Webb asked. Plenty of regrets, Chen admitted, but none about this. About us. About what we did. Webb smiled. You know what the funny thing is? I thought my career was over that day in the ambush. Thought I was dead and buried. But it turned out that was just the beginning. Everything after, meeting you again, taking down Hayes, that was my real service. The part that mattered. It all mattered, Chen said. Every deployment, every mission, every choice that led us here. It shaped who we became, who we are. And who are we, Sarah? Chen thought about it. We are soldiers who remembered what the oath meant, who chose integrity over convenience, who stood up when it cost everything. She looked at him. We are proof that the system can still work when people care enough to fight for it. Webb nodded. I can live with that. He extended his hand. Partners? Chen took it. Partners. Always. A week later, Chun received orders to a new posting. Instructor position at the Army's intelligence school, teaching the next generation of analysts about ethics, integrity, and the courage to speak truth to power. It was not a combat deployment, but it was important work. Rodriguez got assigned to a training battalion, developing counter-sniper curriculum. Torres received a promotion and a position in a military intelligence brigade. And Webb, after accepting the plea deal, found work with a private security firm that valued his skills and did not care about his discharge status. They stayed in touch. Monthly video calls, occasional visits. The bonds forged in fire that time could not break. Chun would sometimes pull out the old Sierra Whiskey 7 challenge coin Webb had given her during training, running her thumb over the worn metal and remembering. One afternoon, teaching a class of new intelligence officers, a student raised her hand. Ma'am, what do you do when you discover something wrong, but reporting it could destroy your career? Chun smiled. You tell me. What does your oath require? The student thought about it. To support and defend the Constitution. Exactly, Chun said. Not to protect careers or reputations or institutional comfort. To defend the Constitution. And sometimes that means standing alone. Sometimes it means risking everything. But that is what service really means. Not following orders blindly, but having the courage to do what is right even when it is hard. She looked around the classroom at young faces trying to understand. I know someone who made that choice, who sacrificed his career, his freedom, everything to stop corruption that was killing his fellow soldiers. The system called him a deserter. I call him a hero because he understood that integrity is not convenient. It is costly, but it is also what separates us from our enemies. After class, Chun walked across the campus, past training grounds where new soldiers learned their craft. Somewhere out there, Webb was doing his job. Rodriguez was teaching. Torres was analyzing intelligence. Morrison was commanding troops. And Hayes was sitting in prison, finally facing justice. The world had not changed completely. Corruption still existed. Bad actors still operated. But they operated knowing that someone might be watching. Someone who cared more about right than advancement. Someone willing to stand up. Chen's phone buzzed. A text from Webb. Just saw your interview on the news. Still making them uncomfortable. Proud of you, partner. She smiled and typed back. Just following your example. Integrity is not optional. His response was immediate. Never was. Never will be. See you next month? Absolutely, Chen replied. She pocketed her phone and continued walking, a soldier who had fought an impossible battle and won. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to matter. 6 months after the congressional hearing, Chen stood in the observation gallery of a military courtroom at Fort Bragg. Below, Colonel Thomas Hayes sat at the defense table, his uniform stripped of insignia, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The court-martial had lasted 3 weeks, and today the verdict would be delivered. Webb sat beside Chun, wearing civilian clothes that still could not quite hide his military bearing. Rodriguez had taken leave to attend, and Torres had driven up from his new posting. Morrison sat in the front row, present in his capacity as a witness, but also as a reminder of the chain of command that had held when tested. The military judge, a stern-faced colonel with 30 years of service, called the court to order. The accused will rise. Hayes stood, and for a moment Chin saw not the corrupt officer who had built an empire on blood and greed, but simply an old man facing the consequences of his choices. The moment of sympathy passed quickly. She remembered Okoye. She remembered the explosion at Sherzai. She remembered Torres's terror as they fled for their lives. The judge read from his prepared statement. Colonel Thomas Hayes, this court finds you guilty on all counts. Conspiracy to commit racketeering, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, conspiracy to illegally transfer weapons, dereliction of duty resulting in death, and conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence presented was overwhelming, and your conduct represents a profound betrayal of the trust placed in you as an officer in the United States Army. Hayes remained standing, stone-faced. The judge continued. This court sentences you to 40 years confinement at the United States Disciplinary Barracks, reduction to the grade of E1, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, and dismissal from service. You have dishonored your uniform and the soldiers who served under your command. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court has none. The gavel fell. Military police moved to take Hayes into custody. As they led him past the gallery, he looked up, and his eyes found Chun. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Chun saw no remorse there, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, only calculation, even in defeat. Then he was gone, and the courtroom began to empty. Chun released a breath she had not realized she was holding. "It is really over," she said quietly. "This part is," Webb replied. "The rest of his network still has trials pending. Kendrick's sentencing is next month. Captain Brennan the month after. It will be years before everyone faces justice. But they will face it," Rodriguez said. "That is what matters. You made sure of that." They walked out of the courthouse into North Carolina sunshine. Morrison joined them on the steps. 40 years. He will die in prison. That is as close to justice as the system can provide. "It is enough," Chun said. She meant it. Hayes would never hurt another soldier. His network was destroyed. The reforms being implemented would make it harder for future conspiracies to take root. Perfect justice might be impossible, but this was real justice. Earned justice. Morrison checked his watch. "I have one more piece of business today. Webb, walk with me." Chun watched them go, curious but trusting. Rodriguez and Torres went to get coffee, leaving her alone on the courthouse steps. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through messages. Rebecca Stokes had sent congratulations on the verdict. Francois Mercier had forwarded an article about military justice reform inspired by their case. Her family had sent their love and pride. 20 minutes later, Webb returned alone, carrying a folder and wearing an expression Chun could not quite read. "Where's Morrison?" she asked. "Had to get back to base," Webb said. "But he gave me this." He handed her the folder. Inside was a letter on official Army letterhead. Chun read it once, then again, unable to quite believe what she was seeing. It was a recommendation for Webb's discharge to be upgraded from dishonorable to general under honorable conditions. Morrison had submitted it along with supporting statements from Chun, Rodriguez, Torres, and surprisingly, 3 senators who had heard their testimony. "Marcus, this could change everything," Chun said. "A general discharge means you keep most of your benefits. You could use your GI Bill. You could get VA health care." Webb nodded slowly. Morrison said it is not guaranteed. The review board could deny it. But he wanted me to know that people are fighting for it. That what I did matters to them. It matters to everyone who knows the truth, Chun said. "You save lives, Marcus. You stop the conspiracy that would have continued killing soldiers. That deserves recognition, not punishment." They walked across the base together, passing training grounds where new soldiers learned to serve. Chun thought about her own students, young intelligence analysts who would face moral challenges in their careers. She taught them about integrity not as an abstract concept, but as a lived reality. She told them about hard choices and costly stands. And sometimes, when the moment was right, she told them about a sergeant who chose honor over safety. That evening, the team gathered at a restaurant off base. Morrison joined them, having finished his duties. They ordered drinks and dinner, the conversation flowing easily between people who had been through fire together. Torres raised his glass. To justice. Delayed but not denied. They drank to that. Then Rodriguez offered his own toast. To the team. We went to war with corruption, and we won. More drinks. Chun felt the warmth of accomplishment, of bonds that would last a lifetime. She stood, glass in hand, to integrity, to courage, to standing up when it costs everything, and to the people who make those stands possible. Morrison stood as well, to second chances, to soldiers who remember their oaths, and to Lieutenant Chun, who never stopped believing in what was right. The glasses clinked, and Chun felt tears threatening. She blinked them back and smiled instead. "You're going to make me cry in public, sir." "Good," Morrison said. "You have earned the right to feel something. All of you have." As dinner concluded, Webb pulled Chun aside. "I have been thinking about what comes next." After the discharge review, after all of this is really finished, what do you think about starting a consulting firm? Chen raised an eyebrow. What kind of consulting? Security, integrity, anti-corruption. We train companies and organizations how to identify and prevent the kind of network we took down. We teach people how to recognize when systems are being compromised. We use everything we learn to make sure it never happens again. Chen considered it. That could work. We would be good at it. We would be great at it, Webb corrected. And Rodriguez has already said he would join when he retires next year. Torres is interested too. Morrison is thinking about it for after his command tour ends. We could build something real, Sarah, something that matters. I like it, Chen said, but I have 2 more years on my contract. After that, I am in. Webb smiled. 2 years gives us time to plan, to build the foundation. And when you are ready, we launch properly. They shook on it, partners planning a future built on the lessons of their past. As Chun drove home that night, she thought about trajectories. How a chance meeting in a sniper course had led to deployment, partnership, separation, and reunion. How Marcus Webb's supposed death had led to his resurrection as an agent of justice. How one decision to trust him had changed everything. The next morning, Chun received an email that made her stop mid-coffee. It was from the Secretary of the Army, brief and formal. Lieutenant Chun, your actions in Afghanistan demonstrated exceptional courage and devotion to duty. While certain aspects of your conduct required investigation, the final review has concluded that you acted appropriately given the circumstances. Your administrative reprimand has been removed from your record. Additionally, you are being awarded the Soldier's Medal for heroism not involving actual conflict with an enemy. Well done, soldier. Chen read it 3 times. The Soldier's Medal was the highest award for non-combat valor. It meant the Army was not just forgiving her actions. They were honoring them. She called Webb immediately. They gave me the Soldier's Medal. His whoop of joy was loud enough that she had to pull the phone away from her ear. Sarah, that is incredible. That is the Army saying you were right. That everything we did was justified. It feels surreal, Chen admitted. 6 months ago, they were investigating me for insubordination. Now they're giving me a medal. Because you earned it, Webb said firmly. Never doubt that. Rodriguez and Torres both received Bronze Stars for valor. Morrison received a Legion of Merit for his command decisions during the crisis. And 2 months later, Webb received word that his discharge had been upgraded to general under honorable conditions. The team assembled one more time for a ceremony at Fort Benning, where the Soldier's Medal was presented to Chun in front of her students and fellow instructors. She stood at attention as the citation was read, describing her actions in exposing corruption at great personal risk. When the medal was pinned to her uniform, Chun looked out at the audience and saw Webb, Rodriguez, Torres, and Morrison standing together. Her team, her family, the people who had made everything possible. In her acceptance remarks, Chun kept it brief. This medal represents more than one person's actions. It represents what happens when soldiers remember their oaths and support each other in doing what is right. I share this honor with Sergeant Marcus Webb, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, and Specialist Torres, who risked everything to stand against corruption, and with Captain Morrison, who showed that leadership means protecting those who speak truth. We did this together, and I will never forget that. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, as people congratulated her and asked about her story, Chun found a quiet moment to step outside. Webb followed. Quite a journey from that first day at Sierra Whiskey 7, he said. Chun smiled. You mean when you told me my shooting position was wrong, and I told you where you could shove your corrections? Webb laughed. And then you made the shot anyway and proved me wrong. I should have known then you were going to be trouble. The best kind of trouble, Chun said. They stood together, watching the sun set over the training ranges. Somewhere out there, new soldiers were learning their craft. Some of them would face moral challenges. Some would be tested. And hopefully, some would remember that integrity matters more than convenience. Thank you, Marcus, Chun said quietly. For everything. For coming back. For trusting me. For fighting when no one else would. Thank you for believing in me, Webb replied. For seeing past the deserter label to the soldier underneath. for being the partner everyone deserves but few find. They did not need to say more. The bond between them spoke louder than words. Partners who had faced the impossible and won, who had sacrificed everything and gained something more valuable than careers or medals. They had gained the certainty that they had done the right thing, and no amount of doubt could ever take that away. 2 years passed like water flowing over stones, reshaping everything while leaving the fundamental truth unchanged. Chun completed her contract with the Army, teaching intelligence officers the difference between following orders and following conscience. Webb built the foundation for their consulting firm, landing contracts with defense contractors who wanted to avoid their own corruption scandals. Rodriguez retired with full honors and joined the venture immediately. Torres decided to stay in uniform but promised to join them when his time came. Morrison made colonel and took command of a brigade, carrying the lessons of their fight into his leadership. Ahmadi, Farouk, and Rashid continued their quiet work in Afghanistan, protecting their communities from those who would exploit them. And Hay sat in a military prison, his empire reduced to a cell and the certainty that he would die there. On a crisp October morning, Chun drove to a small office building outside Washington, D.C. The sign on the door read Phantom 7 Consulting, Integrity Through Action. She smiled every time she saw it. Webb had insisted on the name, and it fit perfectly. Inside, Rodriguez was reviewing a contract proposal while Webb prepared for a client presentation. They looked up as Chun entered, and the years fell away. They were still a team, still partners. "Welcome back, boss," Rodriguez said. He had taken to calling her that despite their equal partnership. Old habits from the military died hard. "Good to be back," Chun said. She had spent the last week testifying at the final trial from the Hayes Network. Captain Brennan had been sentenced to 25 years. The last of the conspirators was finally behind bars. "How did the presentation go?" Webb grinned. "They signed. Full-year contract to review their security protocols and train their ethics compliance team. That puts us in the black for the next 18 months. Chun felt pride swell. They had built something real, something that mattered. Not just a business, but a mission. Every client they helped was an organization that would not fall prey to corruption. Every person they trained was someone who might stand up when it counted. Her phone rang. Morrison's name appeared. She answered. "Sir?" "Not sir anymore." "Sarah," Morrison said. "I'm just James now. Listen, I need a favor. Can your team come to Arlington tomorrow? There is something I want you to see." The next morning, they gathered at Arlington National Cemetery. Morrison met them at the gates wearing civilian clothes, though he still carried himself like the commander he was. He led them through rows of white headstones to a section overlooking the Potomac. There, under an oak tree, was a memorial stone, not a grave, because there was no body to bury, but a marker nonetheless. It read, Staff Sergeant David Okoye and the soldiers of Reconnaissance Team 7. They gave their lives in service to their country. Their sacrifice exposed corruption and saved countless others. They will not be forgotten. Morrison had arranged it. A permanent reminder of the men who had died in that ambush, who had unknowingly sparked the investigation that brought down an empire. Chun knelt and placed her hand on the cold stone. They deserved better than being used as bait, she said quietly. They did, Morrison agreed. But because of what happened to them, because you and Webb refused to accept their deaths as meaningless, they got justice. That is something. Webb knelt beside Chun. I think about them every day, about how close I came to being here with them, about how their deaths gave me purpose when I had nothing left. He looked at Morrison. Thank you for this, for making sure they are remembered. They stood in silence for a long moment, honoring soldiers who had died, not knowing their deaths would change everything. Then Morrison spoke again. There is one more thing. The Army is implementing new protocols based on your recommendations. Independent oversight for high-value operations. Rotation requirement for officers in sensitive positions. Mandatory ethics reviews. It is not perfect, but it is better. You changed the system, all of you. Chun felt the weight of that. They had not just fought corruption. They had prevented future corruption. How many soldiers would live because of the reforms? How many families would not receive the notification that their loved one had died in a manufactured ambush? The numbers were unknowable, but they were real. As they walked back through the cemetery, Chun thought about legacies. Hayes would be remembered as a traitor. Kendrick as a coward who turned on his accomplices. But Okoye would be remembered as a soldier who died with honor, whose death meant something. That mattered. That afternoon, the team returned to the office to find an unexpected visitor waiting. Rebecca Stokes, the journalist who had broken the story, stood outside their door with a camera crew. "Surprise," she said. "I'm doing a 2-year follow-up piece. Where are they now? What has changed?" That sort of thing. "You all game for an interview?" They agreed, and Stokes set up in their conference room. The interview covered familiar ground at first. What had they been doing? How did they feel about the verdicts? What did they think about the reforms? Then Stokes asked a different question. If you could go back to that moment when Marcus first contacted you, when you had to decide whether to trust him, would you make the same choice? Chin did not hesitate. Absolutely. Every time. What we did was hard and costly, but it was right. And I would rather live with the consequences of doing right than the comfort of doing nothing. Webb leaned forward. The system is not perfect. There are still corrupt people in positions of power. But the difference now is that people know someone is watching. Someone who will stand up. That makes corruption harder, riskier, less attractive. That is the legacy I want. Rodriguez added his perspective. A lot of people ask me if it was worth it. If risking our careers and our lives to expose a few corrupt officers really made a difference. And I tell them yes, because those few corrupt officers were killing soldiers, real people with families and futures. We stopped that. How is that not worth everything? The interview concluded, and Stokes packed up her equipment. Before she left, she turned to Chun. "You know you're kind of famous now, right? The lieutenant who took down a colonel. There are people who want to make a movie about this." Chun laughed. "Please no. Hollywood would get everything wrong." "Probably," Stokes agreed. "But the truth is already out there. That is what matters." She shook each of their hands. "Thank you for your service. The real kind." After Stokes left, the team sat together in the conference room. Outside, the world continued spinning. Somewhere, soldiers were serving honorably. Somewhere, others were cutting corners or worse. But now, there were protocols. There was oversight. There was the knowledge that corruption could be exposed. Webb pulled out 4 glasses and a bottle of whiskey he had been saving. "To Phantom 7, he said, to the team that refused to quit. They raised their glasses. Chen added to second chances. To justice delayed but not denied. To integrity when it costs everything. Morrison would have another toast, Rodriguez said. To soldiers who remember their oaths. And Torres would say, Torres being Torres, to not getting killed in the process. They laughed and drank, and Chen felt complete. Not because everything was perfect, but because they had done what they set out to do. They had fought for something real and won. As evening fell, Chen stood at the office window, watching traffic flow past. Webb joined her, and they stood in comfortable silence. Finally, he spoke. No regrets, Sara? Plenty of regrets, Chen said. I regret good soldiers died. I regret the system was so broken that we had to break rules to fix it. I regret that it took so long for justice to happen. But I do not regret fighting, Chen finished. I do not regret trusting you. I do not regret standing up when it would have been easier to stay silent. Those choices made me who I am. Made us who we are. Partners to the end, Webb said. Partners to the end, Chen agreed. Years later, when students asked Chen about her medal, about the story behind it, she would tell them the truth. That doing the right thing is rarely easy. That standing up often means standing alone. That integrity costs something, and you pay that price willingly, or you lose yourself. She would tell them about Marcus Webb, a soldier who had been left for dead, but refused to die. About Rodriguez and Torres, who risked everything to support a mission they believed in. About Morrison, a commander who protected his people even when it cost him politically. About Ahmadi, Farouk, and Rashid, allies who proved that courage transcends nationality. And she would tell them about a call sign. Phantom 7, a designation that meant someone was watching, someone who would not tolerate corruption, someone who remembered that the oath mattered more than comfort. The story would end the same way every time, with a challenge. What will you do when faced with your moment? When doing right means risking everything, will you stand or will you stay silent? Some students would understand immediately. Others would need to live through their own trials first. But Chun planted seeds, hoping they would grow into the kind of soldiers who would make her proud, who would carry forward the legacy that she and her team had fought so hard to establish. If you enjoyed this story, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part or character, or if you have witnessed similar courage in real life. Share what resonated most with you, and let us know if you have seen people stand up for integrity when it cost them everything. In the end, that was all anyone could do. Plant seeds. Tell the truth. Hope that the next generation would be better, braver, more willing to fight for what mattered. Chun had done her part. She had stood when it counted. And somewhere out there, someone else would too. The sun set over Washington, casting golden light across the office where Phantom 7 Consulting did its quiet work. Préventing corruption. Teaching integrity. Making sure that the sacrifices of Okoye and his team meant something lasting. Chun looked at Webb, at Rodriguez, at the life they had built from the ashes of their military careers. This was the victory, not medals or recognition, but the daily work of making the world slightly better, of being the people they had needed when everything was falling apart. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new clients, new opportunities to teach and protect and serve. But tonight, they rested in the certainty that they had fought the good fight and won. Not perfectly, not without cost, but completely, honestly, and with integrity intact. That was enough. That would always be enough.